The coffee was still warm on the dining table when Marissa Hale vanished along with her 2 sons in the coastal town of Cordova, Alaska. Population just over 2,000. The early February morning arrived with a cold gust blowing in from Prince William Sound, carrying a thick layer of snow that blanketed the paths around the Eyak neighborhood. At 6:58 a.m., Marissa's Mrs. Ruth Dennison, noticed the kitchen light from the Hale house spilling through the fogged window as she prepared to head to the dock. Marissa usually got up early to make breakfast for Caleb and Jonah, but that morning there was no familiar sound of conversation or clattering pots and pans echoing through the wooden house. Mrs. Dennison paused at her own window, staring at the silent darkness in front of the Hale porch, where no fresh footprints had been left in the newly fallen snow. What happened in the next 36 minutes would haunt Cordova for more than 12 years and turn that strange absence into one of Alaska's coldest mysteries. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. The winter of 1999 blanketed Cordova, Alaska, in such a hard, icy grip that every movement in this small coastal town seemed to slow down. And against that stark white backdrop, the Hale family maintained their familiar routine. Marissa Hale, 31 years old, cared for her 2 sons, Caleb, 11, and Jonah, 9, in their modest wooden home on the edge of town, while Ethan Hale, 32, worked for a large religious organization in Anchorage and frequently traveled between the 2 places. The previous evening, neighbors had seen Marissa and the 2 boys tidying up in the living room, the light spilling through the window as usual, with no unusual signs noted. In the early hours the next morning, Ethan left the house at 5:30 to go to the gym in town, a habit he had kept for many years. The foggy sky and light snowfall made the path from the house to the main road barely show any footprints. When Ethan returned around 7 a.m., the scene awaiting him was unlike any other morning in the Hale household. The door was unlocked, the house silent, no sounds of children getting ready for school, no footsteps, no warmth from anyone in the kitchen. He moved through each room, calling out for his wife and sons in the thick cold. But the house was completely empty, as if the 3 of them had disappeared in less than 2 hours. Ethan went to knock on neighbors' doors, asking if anyone had seen Marissa and the boys leave the house that morning, but the answers were all the same. No one had noticed any movement from the Hale house. In a small town where even the tiniest change is easily noticed, the fact that all 3 vanished without leaving any sign of departure made the situation baffling from the start. Standing in the cold kitchen amid household items still untouched from the night before, Ethan picked up the landline phone, stared at the clock ticking past 7:01 a.m., and finally dialed the Cordova Police Department. Ethan Hale's call was immediately transferred to the Cordova Police Department's dispatch center, where the on-duty officer promptly logged the report according to 1999 procedures and asked him to confirm his identity, residential address, relationship to the 3 missing persons, and the last time he had seen his wife and sons. The involvement of 2 minors immediately caused dispatch to classify the case as potential endangerment, a significantly higher risk level than typical adult missing person reports. After cross-checking demographic information from town records, dispatch contacted the nearest patrol Units 3 and Unit 5 requesting them to respond to the Hale residence for an on-site assessment. Meanwhile, a missing persons high-priority file was opened, documenting the full timeline from when Ethan left the house, returned, discovered it empty, and called at 7:14 a.m. When Unit 3 arrived, they surveyed the area around the house. No signs of external struggle, no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and no fresh footprints in the thin snow around the front porch. This made the exact timing of the disappearance even harder to pinpoint. Entry was conducted according to initial safety assessment protocol, identifying a safe zone to enter, requiring Ethan to remain outside while officers quickly checked the entire ground floor and upper level to ensure no hazards impeded the search. Without disturbing items, they noted the conditions: beds not heavily disturbed, dining table still set with dishes from the previous evening, no indications that the 3 had prepared to leave. Because 2 children had vanished without explanation and with no evidence they had left voluntarily, the on-scene officer notified dispatch to activate Step 1 of the 1999 risk assessment, including analysis of possibilities: lost, accident, spontaneous departure, or situations involving coercion, but no hypothesis was favored without specific data. A quick summary report was sent to headquarters, and from there dispatch prepared to mobilize an initial search team consisting of patrol officers, community support volunteers, and a specialized coastal terrain search unit, appropriate for Cordova's conditions, where forest, mountain slopes, and a bay shoreline were only a few hundred meters from residential areas. As units were ordered to deploy, the Hale residence was officially designated as the starting point for the search, serving as the central hub for the initial response of all forces. Immediately after the two patrol units confirmed no immediate hazards inside the house, Cordova PD established a Level 1 crime scene perimeter for the entire Hale interior to preserve any potential evidence related to the three's disappearance and limit disturbance before specialized teams took over. Yellow tape was stretched from the front door to the kitchen entrance, and the on-scene officer instructed Ethan not to re-enter until the initial survey was complete. The interior survey team entered with the task of documenting the pristine state of each area, starting with the living room, where the lights were off, curtains half drawn, the coffee table still holding the mug Marissa typically used, and the sofa covered with a thin blanket, indicating the family had spent a normal evening before Ethan left. No items overturned, no disruption, and no signs of a stranger entering. A surface temperature check and room chill level indicated no human movement for over an hour, aligning with Ethan's timeline, while the quick log noted the living room had no abandoned items except an open magazine on the table, suggesting Marissa or Caleb had been reading but was interrupted for an unknown reason. The scene remained so still that every detail stood frozen as it had the previous evening. Moving to the kitchen, they noted the sink clean, counters showing no signs of breakfast preparation, oven off, and washed dishes stacked on the rack as Marissa's end-of-day habit. The absence of morning activity reinforced the hypothesis that the three had vanished before any daily routine began, and the report explicitly stated no residual heat from recently used appliances, consistent with no one being present since the night before. The adjacent dining area survey showed the table and chairs neatly arranged, Marissa's coat still hanging on the hook by the back door. While Caleb and Jonah's two backpacks sat at the foot of the table items, Ethan said the boys always took to school. This observation was flagged as medium-level anomaly because if all three had left intentionally, at least some personal items like coats or backpacks should have been taken. Yet everything remained in its usual place. Upstairs, the survey began with Marissa's bedroom, where the bed was neatly made, the alarm clock showing 6:45 but not set, and makeup items on the dresser untouched. The absence of her heavy coat or snow boots in the closet was noted as high-level anomaly, as given late February Alaska weather conditions, Marissa could not have left without them. Caleb's bedroom showed the blanket partially opened, as if the boy had gotten up normally, toys neatly lined up on the shelf undisturbed. But most critically, Caleb's snow boots were still under the bed and his everyday green coat hung on the hook. This led the survey team to temporarily rule out Caleb leaving voluntarily in the early morning, as heavy snow conditions required children to have proper protective gear. Similarly, Jonah's room showed signs of the previous evening's activities, ending blanket neatly folded, model train set left in the middle of the floor as if abandoned mid-play, but shoes, coat, and gloves were all found in the room, and the team immediately categorized the fact that neither child took survival weather gear as high-level anomaly, one of the key criteria in the 1999 Missing Persons Risk Assessment. After completing the bedroom observations, the survey team compiled a list of missing items: Marissa's wallet not found, her usual wristwatch absent, and the landline phone still in its usual spot. However, there were no signs of rummaging or property loss, so this was classified as low-level anomaly and required cross-referencing with Ethan's statement to determine whether those items were commonly kept elsewhere. The entire house interior was then sealed under Level 1 scene protocol, with each area color-coded for handover to deeper forensic teams. Officers completed the initial scene observation report, emphasizing that the house appeared frozen in time, with no clear signs of force or obvious disturbance. But the absence of essential items indicated the three could not have left in such weather without them, creating a paradox that became central to the next phase of assessment. Right after the house interior was sealed, the investigative team proceeded to the next step, establishing the morning timeline based on Ethan Hale's statement. Since all initial assessments of when the three vanished depended directly on his movements from 5:30 until he returned and called at 7:14. The first interview was conducted immediately in the patrol car, where Ethan detailed his sequence of actions. He woke at 5:10, checked the kitchen and living room before leaving, confirmed the three were still sleeping upstairs, then started the car and left Forest Loop Road around 5:30 to go to Cordova Fitness Center, where he said he usually worked out for 40 to 60 minutes depending on the session. He stated he did not return home mid-session, did not stop at any store or gas station, and did not encounter anyone he knew en route. This initial statement was classified as statement not yet corroborated, meaning all data required independent verification before inclusion in the official timeline. Immediately, an officer was assigned to contact the gym to verify Ethan's entry and exit times. The on-duty manager said they kept a manual sign-in log for members, as in 1999 the gym did not yet use magnetic systems or comprehensive cameras. When Unit 5 officer arrived and cross-checked, the log recorded E. Hale at 5:42, signature matching Ethan's on file, and an exit notation at 6:31. This data did not contradict his statement, but left a gap from 6:31 to around 7,000 when Ethan said he drove home, plus the 14 minutes before the call was logged, creating an unsupervised window of about 43 minutes. The investigative team highlighted this gap in the report because it was a period requiring peripheral evidence to support or adjust the sequence. Since the drive from gym to home took about 10 minutes in light snow, the nearly 40-minute gap made evaluating possibilities during that window a key factor in the overall process. Concurrently, the team constructed Level 1 timeline, the preliminary version based on partially verified data, including the points 5,010 Ethan wakes, 5:30 Ethan leaves home, 5:32 Ethan enters gym, 6:31 Ethan leaves gym, approx. 6:40 to 6:50 Ethan arrives home, 7:14 Ethan calls in, missing persons. Level 1 timeline was marked incomplete because no independent source confirmed Ethan's actual travel from gym to home beyond his own account, and no peripheral witness had seen his vehicle on Marine Highway that morning. To aid cross-verification in the next phase, the technical team mapped Ethan's possible route from gym to neighborhood, marking intersections with potential infrastructure cameras such as warehouses, harbor stations, or private home security cameras. Though most Cordova households in 1999 lacked recording systems, near the end of the survey, an officer additionally asked Ethan to describe the drive home in detail and average speed to determine whether the 40-minute gap could include any activity beyond normal driving. Ethan said he left the gym, paused about 2 minutes in the parking lot waiting for a car ahead, then drove straight home, did not detour into commercial areas, did not stop at stores, and saw no one else on the road. The investigative team noted the consistency in his statement, but stressed that no independent corroborating elements had yet verified each point he mentioned. An internal summary was prepared, designating Level 1 timeline as the standard reference frame for subsequent investigative steps, with any emerging contradictions or new data to be updated into Level 2 timeline. Once authorities completed peripheral checks, including weather verification, morning traffic density, Cordova Harbor reports, and any potential witnesses along the travel route. Completing the preliminary timeline was regarded as the foundation for assessing the feasibility of departure scenarios for the 3 victims and pinpointing the precise window of disappearance, thereby narrowing analysis to the critical period between 5:30 and 700 a.m., a window where even the smallest discrepancy could directly impact assumptions about the initial chain of events. Immediately after Level 1 timeline was finalized and handed to the scene coordination team, Cordova PD activated Search Ring 1 within the Forest Loop neighborhood, where the Hale home sat somewhat isolated but still connected to the network of small roads leading to the town center. The initial search radius was set at 2 km, consistent with 1999 protocol for cases involving 2 minors missing under unknown circumstances, and the deployed force included 6 patrol officers, 2 community response volunteers, and 1 local rescue worker. They divided the area into 3 segments: the residential strip along Forest Loop Road edge, the trail leading down to the western forest edge, and the corridor connecting to the route Caleb and Jonah usually walked to the school bus stop. The goal of the first search ring was not deep analysis, but a quick sweep to check for any witnesses who had seen the 3 leaving the house that morning, while also determining whether there were unusual movement signs on the thin snow layer still bearing impressions from the previous night. Group 1 knocked on neighboring houses, starting with the 2 directly across from Hale. Neighbors all stated they had not seen lights on or anyone leaving in the morning, and from 5:30 to 7,700. Most were indoors due to temperatures dropping to 8 degrees Celsius, limiting outdoor activity. Some households reported the living room light had been off since the previous evening, and no unusual sounds were heard. This reinforced the assessment that if the 3 left, they did so without attracting attention or had departed before neighbors woke. But interior scene data backpacks, coats, snow boots, still inside, made that scenario unlikely. Group 2 checked the route Caleb and Jonah typically used to school, starting from the turn onto Marine Highway and extending to the student pickup point near the small market. They searched for fresh footprints, drag marks, or any patterns that might have been impressed in the thin snow, but found none, as the snow surface from the previous night remained intact, dotted only with occasional wildcat and seabird tracks, no impressions matching small children's steps. One officer used a gauge to measure snow compression to check if early morning snow had been disturbed, then refrozen by cold mist. But measurements showed the layer undisturbed for the past 10 to 12 hours, ruling out the three leaving while Ethan was still home. Group 3 followed the trail down to the western forest edge, the most hazardous area since just a few hundred meters in, led to steep terrain dropping into dense woods and shoreline. They searched for fall marks, dropped items, or directional footprint repeats but found no signs of passage since the previous evening. Meanwhile, one officer was tasked with asking early risers, including 2 fishermen near the dock and 1 delivery driver. They confirmed seeing no women or children moving in the area that morning, and no unfamiliar vehicles entering or leaving the neighborhood. Upon reevaluating all collected data, the investigative team concluded that within a 2-kilometer radius of the house, there were no signs the 3 had left via normal foot travel. No indications of carrying items, no visual witnesses, and no snow terrain changes consisted with movement. The Search Ring 1 summary document highlighted 3 main anomalies. First, no one had seen the 3 since the previous evening. Second, all essential outdoor gear remained in the house. Third, snow cover conditions showed no new movement from the front door to the road. Checks along school routes also ruled out the scenario of the 3 leaving early to catch the bus, as no footprints or supporting evidence existed. Since this was only Search Ring 1, the report was forwarded to Central Command solely for scene data compilation, not to draw conclusions, but its findings created a major paradox. The 3 could not have left the house voluntarily without taking coats or snow boots, yet there were simultaneously no signs they remained inside when Ethan returned. This emptiness from the exterior scene, combined with the unnatural stillness of the house interior, caused Search Ring 1 to conclude without any clear leads, forcing forces to prepare for deeper analysis and expanded search beyond the residential area to verify other possibilities that may have occurred in the narrow window from 5:30 to 7:07 a.m., right after Search Pattern 1 concluded in a state where no direct traces were found proving that the Hale mother and 2 sons had left the residential area. Cordova PD activated Search Pattern 2 under an expanded SAR model. This mobilized semi-professional forces, including the local rescue team, 2 canine units trained to locate missing persons in snow and ice conditions, and 3 snowmobiles from the town's emergency response team. The goal was to extend the search radius beyond the Forest Loop residential area and into zones where individuals could feasibly move given the weather conditions that morning. This expansion was considered mandatory because the immediate scene showed virtually no indication of any direction of travel. The 1999 protocol required constructing a search map based on 3 factors: terrain, wind direction, and the victim's likely mobility under the specific weather conditions. Cordova's terrain is mixed residential areas, border forest slopes, the bay shoreline, and a network of trails leading into small valleys, leading the search team to establish 3 primary directions: west into the forest, east toward the waterfront, and south along the steep trail connecting to the Marine Highway. Wind data recorded at the Cordova Meteorological Station that morning showed a light northeast wind, which helped the K9 teams prioritize scenting areas since airflow could carry odors from any movement zone if present. The 2 K9 teams were deployed along separate routes, one advancing deep into the forest, the other sweeping along the slope down to the water's edge. Concurrently, snowmobiles were assigned to sweep wider swaths of terrain where snow depth was sufficient to preserve impressions, while foot teams focused on natural corridors near the residential area, especially trails commonly used by children playing around the neighboring woods. Just 40 minutes into deployment, Snowmobile Team 2 reported the first piece of evidence: a child's red glove partially embedded in snow along a slope approximately 1 kilometer southwest of the Hale residence. The item was found in mixed terrain, where the slope connected 2 sparse forest tiers, not a path frequently used by children, and crucially, its location was in an area where, per that morning's weather conditions, snow had not been blown away, meaning the object could have remained from the previous evening or early morning hours. The on-scene officer immediately marked the area, placed marker stakes, and requested the K9 teams return to the discovery point for on-site scenting. The K9 units did not show a strong trailing response, but exhibited a mild reaction within a 3-meter radius, sufficient to note the possibility that someone had stood or passed through the area at a time not far removed from the search. The glove was collected using rubber gloves, placed in a sealed paper evidence bag, and assigned temporary evidence code EV01, along with grid coordinates from the SAR map. The coordination team noted that while the item could belong to any child in the area, its isolated appearance in a stretch of woods without convenient paths made its potential relevance to the disappearance noteworthy, especially since both Caleb and Jonah owned red gloves purchased by Marissa as part of their winter outfits. In the on-scene report, the officer recorded that no footprints surrounded the glove's location, though this was within a zone where overnight wind could have partially covered tracks. Therefore, the possibility could not be ruled out that the glove had fallen sometime between the previous afternoon and early that morning. To avoid premature conclusions, EV01 was classified as potentially related evidence, pending comparison with information from Ethan about whether the boys were wearing gloves the previous evening. After evidence collection, the expanded SAR continued southwest, sweeping an additional 500 meters without finding supplementary items, while snowmobiles scoured denser forest areas but recovered only animal tracks. The K9 team along the southern slope reported back that although there was no sustained trailing scent, the dog showed mild reactions at 2 separate points approximately 40 meters apart along the slope. Neither point had visible evidence, but this prompted the coordination team to mark the slope line as a potential travel route for at least one of the 3 missing individuals. The updated SAR map included marking EV01's location, linking the slope line to wind direction, and designating the southwest sector as priority level 2, meaning continued search was required, but insufficient grounds existed to treat it as the primary direction, due to the lack of a continuous chain of evidence and absence of preserved footprints. When Search Pattern 2 concluded its morning phase, the aggregated data remained consistent with prior findings. No clear movement trail existed, but the glove fragment opened the possibility that the mother and sons, or at least one of them, had moved out of the house in a southwest direction, despite interior scene conditions indicating they had not taken coats or snow boots. This very paradox made EV01 an intermediate element insufficient to steer the investigation definitively, yet sufficient to prevent ruling out any scenario involving departure from the home via an unconventional path, particularly given the relatively narrow disappearance time window. Search Pattern 2 therefore concluded with a report emphasizing that the area surrounding Cordova was vast and complex enough to contain isolated evidence drops, and every find must be carefully evaluated before incorporation into the timeline or movement model. After Search Pattern 2 ended and EV01 was documented but lacked sufficient strength to provide clear direction, Cordova PD moved to the next step in the 1999 protocol, collecting indirect witness statements to supplement possible auditory, lighting, and peripheral activity signals during the window from 5 taus to 7:14 a.m., the period where Level 1 timeline still contained large gaps. The investigative group was divided into 2 teams, one covering the area near the Hale residence and homes along Forest Loop, the other interviewing early morning witnesses such as newspaper deliverers, fishermen, and delivery personnel. The objective of this statement round was to determine whether any signs indicated movement in or around the Hale home at dawn, particularly related to sounds, lights turning on, off, or silhouettes. Team 1 approached the adjacent house to the north, occupied by an elderly couple who routinely woke very early. Mrs. Park, who answered the door, stated she briefly woke around 5:55 a.m. due to a sound like a door gently closing, but because wind occasionally rattled their own door, she did not consider it unusual. When asked if the sound came from the Hale house direction, she said she was unsure, only that it was very faint, not loud, and she heard no subsequent footsteps. The investigative team recorded this in the category unidentified sound, low to medium reliability, but it remained the first fragment suggesting possible movement inside the house before 16 a.m. At the house to the south, another witness, Mr. D. Dermott, who habitually brewed coffee at 6W Amir, reported looking through his kitchen window and noticing a light on in the lower level of the Hale house. He could not specify whether it was the living room or kitchen light, but confirmed it was moderate brightness, not full illumination. Notably, he stated he saw no silhouettes or movement through the curtains, only steady light lasting about 10 to 15 minutes before he left the kitchen for work. This observation was classified as high-value information because it contradicted Ethan's statement that all lower-level lights were off when he left at 5:30 a.m. The team immediately added this datum to the Level 2 timeline cross-reference list, as the discrepancy between an inside occupant's account and a neighbor's observation could indicate activity between 5:30 and 6 ties port. Meanwhile, Teen 2 approached the most significant indirect witness, Liam Navarro, the newspaper deliverer for the Forest Loop route, who typically entered the neighborhood between 6:05 and 6:02 a.m., depending on road conditions. He stated that snow was light that morning and roads were easier than previous days, so he reached the Hale house area around 6:80 a.m. The standout detail in his statement was that as he passed the Hale residence, he noticed the front door not fully closed, appearing slightly ajar by a few inches. Navarro said he did not dismount or look closely due to the extreme cold, but he flagged the ajar door as unusual since most Cordova homes remain tightly shut on winter mornings. When pressed further, he confirmed the house lights were off at that time, though he was unsure whether this occurred before or after he passed. This information was immediately flagged red at high alert level in the on-scene report because it directly contradicted Mr. Meadyself. Dermot's observation of lights on at 6:00. The team was therefore compelled to seek more precise timing from both witnesses. Additionally, investigators asked Navarro if he saw any unfamiliar footprints or vehicles near the Hale house. He replied that snow on the access road to the Hale home was very clean, no fresh vehicle tracks, aligning with observations from Search Pattern 1 and reinforcing peripheral data consistency. When both teams compiled all statements, the coordination group promptly updated to Level 2 timeline. In this revised version, certain markers remained unchanged, e.g., 5542 to 631 from gym data. The 631 to 7:31 gap block persisted as needing clarification. But two new critical markers emerge, Xishan Zacharia, 5555 unidentified sound possibly from the Hale door. 2, 661010 light on in the house per Mr. Dermot. Conversely, Navarro's 6:08 marker indicated lights off and door ajar, meaning house activity may have changed within mere minutes. Level 2 timeline thus showed a high variability data zone from 5055 to 61010. Annotated, inconsistent activity, source verification required. The lead investigator added the assessment that no statements in this round supported the possibility of the three victims voluntarily leaving the home. Instead, the data suggested movement inside the house after Ethan's departure. Analytically, the narrow window light on-off event, combined with the vague door sound, led the team to conclude activity occurred inside the home at dawn, though insufficient to determine its nature. Indirect witness statements therefore became a key supplemental element of Level 2 timeline, narrowing the zone of suspicion and bridging interior scene data with Search Pattern 2 findings. Immediately after indirect witness statements were integrated into Level 2 timeline and signs emerged of activity inside the Hale home following Ethan's departure, the investigative team decided to expand off-site evidence collection to determine whether the disappearance could relate to pre-existing threats. This was a mandatory step under the 1999 protocol when missing persons cases involved children and carried potential criminal escalation. When asked about any unusual events in prior months, Ethan reported that the family had received several anonymous threatening letters related to his work for a religious organization in Anchorage, but he insisted he had reported them to the organization's internal security and was advised not to worry too much because the content was vague. This response immediately prompted the team to request that Ethan provide all retained threatening letters from both home and workplace. A temporary seizure warrant was swiftly issued on legal grounds, as the letters could directly relate to motive for assault or coercion. Upon returning to the Hale residence, investigators recovered 3 envelopes from a downstairs desk drawer, each without a return address, postmarked from Anchorage, and mailed over a 10-week period prior to the disappearance. The first envelope contained a typed note: "Stop what you were doing. It is not for you to decide who will be safe." The content did not name any family member but was classified as low-level indirect threat due to its general warning nature. The second envelope was more serious: "If you do not stop, your family will suffer the consequences." The explicit mention of family led investigators to classify it as medium-level threat. The third was the most severe: "I know your schedule. No one can protect them forever." Though lacking further detail, the phrasing suggested the writer had tracked Ethan's routine, prompting immediate classification as high-level threat. All 3 envelopes were resealed under evidence codes EV02A, EV02B, and EV02B, and EV02C, with photos of discovery locations and seizure logs. Concurrently in Anchorage, 2 officers coordinated with Ethan's organization and recovered 2 additional letters sent directly to internal security. Content was similar but did not explicitly reference family, though one included, "You think you're the only one who knows what happens in the dark?" Investigators assessed that the appearance of multiple letters over a continuous period with escalating threat levels indicated the sender possessed strong motive or was progressing toward concrete action. Workplace letters were sealed under EV03. After classification, all 5 letters were immediately forwarded to the Anchorage Crime Lab handwriting analysis section, even though some were typed. Examiners could still analyze mechanical impressions, ink quality, font type, possible typewriter or printer, as well as minor paper markings and postmarks. For typed letters, investigators requested checks for correction signs, margin inconsistencies, and repeatable drafting habits. By cross-referencing postmark time zones with Ethan's provided Anchorage work attendance data, the team constructed a timeline matchup. The first letter was mailed on a day Ethan was present at headquarters, the second on a day he traveled back to Cordova, and the third, the strongest, threat mailed just 3 days before the family's disappearance. This raised 2 analysis points. First, the sender likely knew Ethan's schedule or routine with reasonable proximity. Second, the phrase, "no one can protect him forever," may not have been mere bluster. The team added relevant letter mailing dates to Level 2 timeline within the pre-disappearance multi-week phase, noting that the escalation in threat content coincided with the Hale family's reported feelings of unease. However, because the Hale home interior showed no clear signs of forced entry or coercion, these letters were marked as indirect evidence, potential motive, rather than proof of direct attack on the morning of disappearance. In the final section summary report, the lead investigator noted that the existence of a progressively intensifying series of threats could not be ignored, especially with explicit family references, but no direct link yet existed between the final letter and the 5055-610 a.m. anomalous house activity window. Thus, the letters constituted peripheral data requiring further cross-referencing with on-site developments. EV02 and EV03 were dispatched for forensic examination the same day, opening an additional analytical avenue pending technical results. Immediately after completing seizure and sealing of the threatening letters, the investigative team shifted to the second major off-site data category, examination of the Hale family's communications and finances to assess whether the mother and sons might have left voluntarily, planned a disappearance, or made prearranged logistical financial preparations prior to the event. This was a required step under the 1999 protocol to rule out voluntary missing scenarios. First, the technical team extracted data from the sole frequently used landline phone in the Hale home. Mobile phones were not yet common in Cordova at the time. Call history was retrieved by reading the most recent dial memory. Results showed no outgoing calls from the home from the previous evening through 7:00 a.m. on the incident day, except for one brief 42-second call from Caleb to a classmate at 7:00 p.m. the prior evening. No unfamiliar calls, no overnight incoming calls, and crucially, no evidence whatsoever of Marissa contacting anyone early that morning. This aligned with the interior scene. No signs of morning activity. Next, investigators coordinated with the fax service provider at Ethan's workplace after the threatening letters suggested possible anonymous faxes during the same period. Internal security provided 3 suspicious faxes sent to the office over the 6 weeks prior to disappearance, each transmitted from different Anchorage area public fax stations and one from Juneau, indicating deliberate location obfuscation. All used concise wording similar to the letter's style and appeared generated at public machines. The team collected full copies, coded EV04A through EV04C, and forwarded them for analysis of header lines, including date timestamps and originating machine codes, though public machines often left no identifying traces. Preliminary findings: fax transmission times did not coincide with Ethan's known communications or travel, but 2 were sent on days he was present in Anchorage, creating a weak but noteworthy correlation. Concurrently, the financial analysis team reviewed Marissa and Ethan's bank accounts over the prior 90 days. Transactions were routine household, groceries, utility bills, dock parking fees for Ethan's Anchorage trips, and minor child school-related spending by Marissa. No unusual cash withdrawals, no large transfers, no asset liquidation or sale patterns, and, most importantly, no train tickets, airfare, or travel service bookings in the 3 weeks preceding disappearance. This reinforced the argument that the family had not prepared to leave Cordova. Moreover, Marissa's final transaction occurred at 4:17 p.m., the day before disappearance at the local grocery store for $19.80, consistent with normal daily activity. No financial moves suggested emergency, distress, or departure preparation. The team also checked Caleb and Jonah's school records. No long-term absence requests, no withdrawal paperwork, no notes indicating Marissa had considered relocating the children. The school confirmed normal attendance by the mother and sons on their last day before disappearance. This data was entered into an exclusion matrix listing elements required for a family to voluntarily abandon residence: financial preparation, external contacts, movement traces, essential items taken. None of the four were present. In the behavioral assessment report, the lead investigator concluded the voluntary departure scenario was fully ruled out for three main reasons. First, house interior showed no signs of departure preparation. Second, communication data contained no signals from Marissa indicating intent to contact outsiders. Third, stable financial data showed the family operating on normal daily rhythms. The final detail added to Level 2 timeline, the 4:17 p.m. marker. The day before disappearance was designated Marissa's last routine transaction, enhancing event sequence continuity. The analysis team also appended a timeline note: no financial or communication evidence supporting planned family departure hypothesis. Complete elimination of this scenario clarified remaining investigative directions and refocused attention on the 5:55 to 6:10 a.m. window, the sole period across the entire event chain showing unexplained anomalous signals incompatible with ordinary Hale family activity. Right after ruling out the scenario of voluntary departure from the home and finding no additional signs of movement within the residential area, the SAR commander decided to expand the search into the Chugach Forest system, the rugged area that was the only zone directly adjacent to Forest Loop and had the potential to contain evidence if the three victims or someone else had passed through. SAR Phase 3 was organized on a larger scale, including foot teams, K9 units, 3 snowmobiles, and a rear support medical team. The entire accessible area was divided into search grids of 200 times 200 meters based on elevation maps, tree density, and the likelihood of scent retention in northeast winds. Each grid was marked with coded symbols to ensure no area was overlooked. In Part 1, the handwriting examiner magnified pen strokes appearing at envelope corners, mainly small notations such as house numbers, X marks on folds, and ceiling drags. Since the entire letter content was typed, these small pen marks were the only limited data available for comparison with Ethan's samples. The examination found some fold drags with directions similar to Ethan's typical personal envelope sealing method, but the degree of similarity fell below the high probability threshold, as fold drag coincidences can occur among many people. The examiner concluded the match was at the level of cannot exclude but insufficient basis to identify the same writer. In Part 2, the typewriter and printer analysis group compared ink quality, letter edge noise, line skew, and font compression with the database of low-cost laser printers sold in Alaska during 1997 to 1999. Results indicated that letters EV02A and EV02B were highly likely printed on the same Lexmark 570 model, common at downtown Anchorage public copy shops. EV02C, however, showed different ink characteristics, darker and less noisy, suggesting it may have been printed on a different machine, possibly outside Anchorage. This increased the complexity of the letter sequence, indicating the sender may have deliberately switched tools to avoid tracing. However, the lab emphasized that identifying the printer cannot identify the sender. In Part 3, examiners compared handwritten envelope notations with 14 samples of Ethan's signatures and writings from work-related documents, including meeting notes and leave requests. The analysis group noted 3 similarities. 1. The downward stroke of the letter Y tends to break slightly. 2. The slant when writing the number 7 leans slightly right. 3. The cross stroke on the letter Z is shorter than average. However, these were common form characteristics, not unique individual traits, so they could not be used to conclude the envelope writer was Ethan. The official forensic report stated, no sufficiently reliable matching points found to identify the same writer. However, the possibility of the same writer cannot be excluded. The investigation team received this result with high caution, as per 1999 legal standards. Threatening letters only carry strong evidentiary value when A. there is clear handwriting match, B. There is direct linkage to criminal conduct. Or, key content specifically describes events occurring before or during the disappearance. The EV02 letter series and EV04 faxes did not meet these three criteria. The lead investigator immediately placed the letters in the medium-level suspicious indicators group, meaning they could relate to motive or contextual pressure, but were insufficient to constitute a criminal element. An additional lab analysis also showed that the letter content, although clearly threatening, did not describe specific methods of harm, did not mention Cordova, and contained no internal family information related to the Hales. Notably, the phrase, "I know your schedule" in EV02C created the impression that the sender knew Ethan's work routine, but when cross-referenced with postmark dates, the specialist pointed out the letter was mailed on a day Ethan was in Anchorage for work, a detail that could be guessed by acquaintances or those connected within the religious organization. This did not rule out relevance, but also did not prove the sender was in Cordova at the time of the disappearance. The team placed the results on the evaluation board and concluded that the threatening letter series held investigative value but no direct legal evidentiary value. They were classified as contextual data, to be monitored but not usable to infer activity in the Hale home between 5:55 to 6:10 a.m. In the consolidated report to the commander, the lead investigator noted that the threatening letters could be background noise causing misdirection or could relate to a motive outside Cordova. However, with current elements, they did not help identify an actor present in the Hale home at dawn and did not alter the investigation focus. Therefore, all letters were transferred to temporary storage under the suspicious indicators category, an open category that could be upgraded or downgraded as subsequent investigation phases produce new data. After the threatening letters examination yielded no legal breakthrough and no direct connection to events inside the Hale home on the morning of the disappearance, the investigation team shifted focus to analyzing the family's social factors to determine whether any personal motive existed prior to the disappearance. Following the 1999 Risk Assessment Protocol for Family-Related Missing Persons cases, the first step was verifying the marital status of Ethan and Marissa, including history of tension, internal financial situation, and relationship stability. K-9 Team 1 was deployed from the Southwest Trail near the location where Glove EB-01 was found to determine whether a scent trail extended into the sparse forest. At the same time, snowmobiles were sent along the two slopes where snow was deeper but more likely to preserve impressions or slide marks, especially if a small motorized vehicle had moved through during the night. Approximately 1 hour after deployment began, the foot team in Grid C3 discovered new evidence. A dark blue children's jacket buried under about 5 to 7 centimeters of snow, lying on its side next to an alder tree trunk, approximately 2.2 kilometers from the Hale residence as the crow flies. The discovery location was marked with a red stake and immediately reported to the coordination center. The jacket was described as consistent in size with Jonah, based on Ethan's early statements. However, investigators cautiously noted that dark blue winter children's jackets were quite common in Cordova, so it could not yet be considered direct evidence. Nevertheless, the characteristics of the location led to the item being classified as high-level anomaly because, 1. Grid C3 was not a route typically used by children or families. 2. The fresh snow layer from the previous night did not fully cover the jacket, suggesting it had fallen there within the last 12 to 18 hours. And 3. The jacket showed no signs of being chewed or dragged by animals, indicating it had remained undisturbed at the discovery site since it fell. The oversight team assigned a case number EV05 and proceeded to collect surrounding traces. Under a thin layer of snow about 7 meters from the jacket's position, a SAR member discovered a long compression groove running along a northeast axis. The groove had a smooth, continuous drag appearance, not consistent with human footprints, and more compatible with a snowmobile track. Notably, while Cordova commonly saw civilian snowmobiles in winter, Grid C3 was outside normal routes, and SAR confirmed the compression groove was not created by search team snowmobiles, as at the time of approach, snowmobiles were only operating in C4 and C6. Therefore, this groove was flagged as uncontrolled mechanical trace requiring cross-verification. After measuring the groove's width, compression depth, and direction, the technical team determined the direction of travel was from northeast towards C3, not the reverse. This gave rise to a major hypothesis. It was possible a motorized vehicle had entered the forest area around the time the family disappeared, and that route passed through the zone where Jonah's jacket was found. K-9 units were brought in immediately after the jacket was secured, although northeast winds quickly dispersed scents. One of the two dogs showed a mild reaction at the intersection between the snowmobile groove and the tree where the jacket was found, but could not follow an extended trail. The analysis group temporarily proposed three possibilities. 1. The jacket fell from Jonah or was carried by someone and dropped there. 2. The jacket was blown by wind from another location of very low probability due to its weight and the snow coverage pattern. 3. The jacket was deliberately left behind by someone. When the report reached the center, the SAR commander requested cross-checking of the previous night's Chugach forest activity data from the ranger team. No reports of off-route snowmobile activity. No registered backcountry groups after 4 p.m. This placed the C3 snowmobile trace on the environmental evidence list as EV06, though the exact formation time remained unclear. SAR Phase 3 continued to expand into 2 adjacent grids, but no additional evidence was found, and the thick snow in the area suggested any traces from the previous night may have been partially obscured. When Phase 3 concluded, the data synthesis team highlighted 2 key points. First, the appearance of EV05 reinforced the possibility that one or both children had moved or been transported into the forest zone. Second, the northeast-oriented snowmobile trace was a major anomaly, as Cordova had no record of any vehicle operating in that area at the time of the family's disappearance. Both pieces of data were incorporated into the Phase 3 summary report and prepared for attachment to the environmental timeline, opening the next direction of analysis regarding departure from the residential area by non-pedestrian means. When the Phase 3 SAR report was forwarded to headquarters, the parallel investigation team received information from the Anchorage Crime Lab regarding progress on the forensic examination of the 5 threatening letters and 3 anonymous faxes. As the investigation began to show 2 important data branches, one related to environmental evidence in the Chugach Forest and one related to the escalating sequence of threatening letters prior to the disappearance, the need to determine the legal value of the letters became urgent to assess whether they were mere background noise or a constituting element of motive. The lab divided the analysis into 3 parts. 1. Examination of mechanical marks and handwriting structure on envelopes and signatures. 2. Comparison of typed letter forms with data on common public printers in Anchorage during 1998-1999. S3. Cross-referencing postmarks and pen stroke characteristics with handwriting samples provided by Ethan Hale. Through expanded interviews with Marissa's close friends and colleagues, the team gathered information that in the past 6 months, their marriage had shown signs of strain, not at the level of violence or frequent conflict, but described as cooling and markedly reduced communication. One of Marissa's close friends reported that she had complained about Ethan spending more time in Anchorage than work required and becoming distant in family life. In parallel, one of Ethan's Anchorage colleagues noted that he frequently used payphones instead of the office phone, recorded as unusual behavior in a normal work context that did not require high confidentiality. These signals prompted the team to expand information collection, focusing on the possibility of an extramarital relationship and element that could create personal motive, especially if family tension had escalated near the time of disappearance. From the 3rd interview with an employee at the religious organization where Ethan worked, the name Tara Finch first emerged. A temporary event assistant who had helped with organization events in Anchorage the previous year and was seen conversing intimately with Ethan on multiple occasions. Although witnesses did not confirm a personal relationship, they described that the two exchanged more than usual and at times stood talking privately in the hallway. This data was immediately placed in the urgent verification group. The team traced Tara Finch's demographic information through Alaska residency records and quickly identified her as a freelance events assistant living in Wasilla, who had supported 6 work trips for the organization where Ethan worked in the roughly year and a half before the Hale family disappeared. When invited for interview, Tara initially cooperated but was reserved, confirming she knew Ethan but describing the relationship as confident friends and work exchange colleagues. However, when asked to review correspondence history and messages from 1998-1999, Tara admitted they communicated regularly via email and occasionally through personal letters. As mobile phones were not yet common then, she provided some old email printouts in which Ethan used noticeably more intimate phrasing than typical colleague communication, such as "perhaps we understand each other in a way others can't see," or "I feel more comfortable sharing with you than with anyone else right now." These phrases could not conclude a romantic relationship, but were evaluated by the team as exceeding standard professional communication norms. When asked about the most recent contact, Tara stated that Ethan had written her a letter 2 weeks before the family disappeared, postmarked from Anchorage, sharing that he was going through a difficult period in his family and sometimes didn't know how to get things back to the way they were. Tara asserted she had not met Ethan in person in the past 3 months and had never been to Cordova. This statement did not contradict her financial and travel data, but the team noted the need to cross-verify the postmark of Ethan's letter to Tara to build the communication timeline. Meanwhile, the Cordova PD behavioral analyst compiled all data and issued a preliminary assessment of personal motive. 1. Signs of marital strain in the past 6 months. 2. Existence of communication exceeding normal levels between Ethan and another woman. 3. Ethan described himself as experiencing family difficulties in the letter to Tara. 4. Escalation of anonymous threats may coincide with psychological turbulence in the Hale family. Although no evidence showed Tara played a direct role, the team classified this data group as potential personal motive, emphasizing that the existence of a third relationship, regardless of its nature, could have influenced Ethan's mental state prior to the disappearance. This assessment was included in the Consolidated Analysis Report, but with the note, insufficient to draw conclusions, as at this point no data showed a direct link between Ethan Tara and the disappearance of Marissa and the 2 children. However, per investigation protocol, when a family disappearance lacks signs of voluntary departure and shows a context of marital conflict, the team was required to place personal relationships in the preliminary core analysis group. Therefore, in the investigation timeline, the behavioral analysis group added 3 new markers. A. The date Ethan mailed the letter to Tara 2 weeks before the disappearance. B. Till the last email exchange between Ethan and Tara. C. The date Tara ceased in-person meetings with Ethan. All data was consolidated into the table, personal motive preliminary version, prepared for cross-referencing with the scene timeline to determine whether this relationship factor was merely background noise or had actual impact on the chain of events on the morning the Hale family disappeared. Immediately after the behavioral analysis group completed the preliminary personal motive assessment and added the Ethan-Tara contact markers to the file, the investigation team moved to the key step, Timeline Alignment Round 2, aimed at standardizing the entire time axis from 500 to 7014 a.m., the period considered the critical activity window in the disappearance. Timeline Level 1 relied solely on Ethan's statements and Jim verification data, but after the emergence of indirect witness statements, environmental evidence, and social data, the team was compelled to rescrutinize each time marker by integrating 3 independent data groups. 1. Neighbor and early riser statements in the area. 2. Weather data and snow trace preservation potential. 3. Interior condition of the Hale residence at the time Ethan reported the missing persons. The analysis team began by constructing a minute-by-minute timeline map for 53714 per Alaska's Child Missing Persons Investigation Standard at the time and cross-referenced each piece of comb information against Ethan's described activities. An anomaly appeared immediately at the 5555 marker when Mrs. Park described the sound like a door gently closing while she was making tea. This sound conflicted with Ethan's statement that he left the house at 5:30 and closed the door carefully. Weather records from the Cordova Meteorological Station showed light northwest wind, meaning sound from the Hale house could fully carry to Mrs. Burost, Parks giving her observation environmental reliability. This marker was flagged as medium-level anomaly. Immediately following was the 6x10 marker when Mr. Potty Dermott saw lights on the lower floor of the Hale house on for about 10 to 15 minutes. This was the strongest conflict point with Ethan's statement, as he asserted all lights were off when he left, and he did not return before 7:00. The team requested analysis of the light level Mr. Dermott described by comparing the projection angle from the living room window past the opposite house. Calculations showed the observed light level was consistent with the kitchen light or living room light being turned back on after Ethan left. Interior condition also confirmed lights were off when police arrived, meaning the lights had been on briefly then turned off before 700. The analysis team marked this as direct conflict with homeowner statement and assigned it highest priority for clarification. The next marker was 6008. The time paper delivery person Navarro described the front door as not fully closed. This created a complex time intersection. If the door was ajar at 6008 but lights were off, It meant lights had been on before 6006 down, but turned off quickly before Navarro passed. Or Navarro may have viewed from an angle where light was obscured. Analysis of Navarro's approach path showed he approached the Hale house from the southeast where interior light could be blocked by curtain angles, meaning his observation did not negate Mr. Dermot's. The team concluded the difference between the two statements was not a contradiction, but two complementary observations within the same time window. When aligning the three statements into the timeline, the analysis team identified the 5055 to 610 period as having high probability indoor activity, while Ethan's statement claimed no one was home during that window. This gap was the first deviation deemed direct contradiction with the homeowner. Next, the team cross-referenced the timeline with snow conditions. Since no footprints exited the front door in the morning snow layer, the analysis affirmed that if anyone left the house during 5055 to 610, they did not exit via the front path. This aligned with the ajar door marker, but also increased the likelihood that the door was disturbed from inside without subsequent departure. Interior data further reinforced this. No signs of morning preparation, no missing items, no disturbance, but evidence of someone having gone downstairs after Ethan left. The analysis team then incorporated the preliminary personal motive factor into the timeline to determine whether marital strain could explain the time discrepancy. Ethan's intimate communication with Tara Finch led the team to flag the possibility of not fully truthful in statements about morning activities in the alignment file. Combining everything, the investigation team identified three clear discrepancies with Ethan's statement. 1. Door sound at 5055 2 lights on approximately 6:10:3, door ajar at 6088. None of these could be explained by the statement, left home at 5:30, and did not return before 7:00. With three consecutive deviations, timeline level 2 was standardized to reflect the likelihood of activity inside the Hale home, while Ethan claimed absence. The investigation team concluded the discrepancy between witness statements and the homeowner's statement is sufficient to designate Ethan Hale as a person of interest, no longer merely a witness. Placing Ethan in this category did not imply guilt, but marked him as requiring continued data cross-verification in subsequent investigation phases, particularly regarding the 5:55 to 6:10 a.m. sequence which, per specialist assessment, was the potentially decisive period in the disappearance chain of Marissa and the two children. After the second timeline was established, clearly identifying three significant discrepancies compared to Ethan's statements and placing him in the person of interest category, the investigative team shifted to analyzing vehicles and natural conditions to determine whether any motorized vehicle was used during the period of unusual activity in the Hale residence. This is an essential step in missing persons cases in areas with distinctive forest snow terrain like Cordova. First, the technical team examined Marissa's vehicle, a silver older model Subaru parked in the garage in the exact position Ethan described. The fuel gauge showed it was nearly full, consistent with information from Marissa's close friend that she had filled up 2 days earlier. The windshield, hood, and exterior were covered in a thin, even layer of snow with no signs of being swept or wiped, indicating the vehicle had not been used that morning. Mud deposits on the wheel wells and undercarriage showed dried mud from several days prior, with no fresh adhesion. This reinforced the conclusion that Marissa's vehicle had not moved for at least 24 hours before inspection. The interior showed no signs of being opened or disturbed, and the floor mats had no fresh shoe prints. All these factors led to the conclusion that Marissa's vehicle played no role in any family movement on the morning of the disappearance. In contrast, inspection of Ethan's vehicle, a dark green Ford Explorer, revealed several points of concern. First, the right front wheel well had damp mud, completely different from the old dried mud on the other three wheels. The damp mud was even darker in color, consistent with the mud mixed with snowmelt, commonly found on unpaved sections along the northeastern forest edge of Cordova. The technical team used probes to sample and determine the mud's moisture, finding it had adhered to the vehicle within the last 12 hours, inconsistent with the route Ethan described. Additionally, the front and rear right tires showed unusual compression marks, not typical wear from flat roads, but angled compression leaning to the right, a pattern often seen when a vehicle travels over sloped terrain or narrow forest trails. This prompted the technical team to question the actual route Ethan took that morning. Further inspection included checking engine temperature to determine when the vehicle was used. Although the vehicle had been off since police arrival, the engine and exhaust temperatures remained warmer than the average for a vehicle parked overnight at 8 degrees Celsius. suggesting it had been run for more than the 10 minutes Ethan's statement described, possibly longer. However, this finding was qualitative and not sufficient to constitute direct legal evidence. The analysis team also examined the snow around the vehicle to determine if it had been moved early that morning. Snow adjacent to the right tires was more compacted and showed layered displacement, suggesting the vehicle may have been slightly repositioned or moved out and back into the garage. But since this was an area with strong winds, snow drift displacement could cause misinterpretation of tracks. So the investigative team recorded this data under environmental anomalies, low reliability. Meanwhile, examination of snow trajectories on Forest Loop Road showed no fresh vehicle tracks on the main road, making the hypothesis of the vehicle exiting the residential area via the usual route less plausible. However, Cordova has numerous side paths leading to boat docks, storage yards, or forest segments connecting to the Marine Highway. Since rounds 1 and 2 found no clear tracks, the investigative team could not rule out the possibility that the vehicle moved via less used routes, and light, subsequent snowfall obscured the evidence. The technical team also assessed the impact of snowfall in the 12 hours prior to inspection. Light to moderate snow fully obscures footprints in 2 to 3 hours and erases small tire tracks in 4 to 6 hours. But large tire tracks can leave compression ruts if the snow is not too deep. Therefore, the absence of tracks leaving the Hale residence could not prove the vehicle did not move. Conversely, it could not be ruled out that the vehicle had left and snow later covered the ruts. Ultimately, the investigative team compiled the data and concluded: 1. Marissa's vehicle was not used at all. 2. Ethan's vehicle showed 3 anomalies: fresh mud adhesion, unusual tire compression marks, and engine temperature inconsistent with a stated itinerary. 3. Snow conditions did not allow definitive determination that the vehicle did not leave via side routes. However, since no physical evidence connected the vehicle to the forest area where the child's clothing was found, these anomalies were classified as suggestive data rather than direct evidence. Thus, the vehicle analysis only raised additional questions for the timeline, but was insufficient to determine Ethan's actual route that morning. When the vehicle examination failed to produce direct evidence and the anomalies on Ethan's vehicle were only sufficient to raise suspicion rather than meet the threshold for charges, the investigative team officially entered a stalemate phase of familiar situation in missing persons cases without bodies in Alaska during the late 1990s. Despite conducting 3 search rounds, collecting indirect statements, analyzing the interior crime scene, reviewing family relationships, and examining threatening letters as well as vehicles, no data reached the threshold of evidence establishing criminality under Alaska state legal standards. No body, no signs of violence at the scene, no direct eyewitness seeing the mother and children forced to leave the home, and no physical evidence showing assault or coercion. All collected data remained at the level of anomalous, suggestive, or not ruled out, preventing the case file from advancing to a full criminal investigation. The investigative team held a summary meeting, analyzed the 3 main data groups, and concluded that the first group crime scene data remained at the level of showing unusual activity in the Hale residence between 5:55 and 6:10 a.m., but with no physical signs of crime. The second group, outdoor forest environmental data only, had 2 disconnected pieces of evidence not linked to the events inside the home. The third group, behavioral data, showed signs of strain in Ethan's marriage but insufficient to consider it a motive for harm, and there was also no evidence Ethan traveled to the search area that morning. Consulting legal experts emphasized that prosecution required at least one of 3 elements: 1. A body or clear signs of harm; 2. Direct eyewitness; 3. Physical evidence of an establishing nature. None of the 3 existed. Ethan's designation as person of interest only meant he was the last person known to have contact with the victims, not a suspect. Meanwhile, the threatening letter and anonymous fax could not be linked to specific actions on the day of the disappearance. Ethan's vehicle showed anomalies, but did not prove the route. Neighbor statements only reflected activity inside the home, without identifying who carried it out. More importantly, Cordova's weather with light snow and northeast winds had erased most potential traces within the first few hours, rendering environmental analyses unreliable for reconstruction. After 3 weeks of continuous investigation, the case lead submitted a report assessing insufficient basis to continue as a criminal matter and recommended closing the file under the status unresolved, missing persons high risk. This proposal followed 1999 regulations, If after 30 days no body is found, no financial or communication activity from the victims occurs, no signs of life exist, but also no evidence of crime, the file is archived at medium priority and only reopened with new evidence, new statements, or new supporting technology. Once the recommendation was approved, the Marissa Caleb Jonah case officially entered legal limbo. It could not be classified as voluntary departure, nor could it yet be deemed a homicide. The investigative team was forced to withdraw search horses, submit a summary report to Alaska State Troopers, transfer evidence to storage, and hand over file oversight to the Cordova Missing Persons Unit. The preliminary case closure process ended with 3 key notes. 1. No direct evidence of crime was obtained. 2. No rote was established. 3. No indication the 3 victims were alive after the evening before the disappearance. This marked the end of the initial investigation phase, leaving an unsolved triple missing persons case and a file that had to remain dormant in unresolved status until new data emerged, a situation many cases in Alaska's remote mountainous regions during that period had faced. After the disappearance of Marissa Hale and her 2 children was classified as unresolved, the entire case file was transferred to the Alaska State Troopers Cold Case Unit in accordance with procedures for triple victim missing persons cases, lacking signs of survival or clear evidence of crime. Starting in early 2000, this unit began by standardizing all materials transferred from Cordova PD, search reports, statements, SAR area maps, interior crime scene photos, threatening letter reports, financial data, phone communication logs, and numbered evidence items EV01 to EV07. All were reclassified under AST's new archiving system at the time, which prioritized organization by evidence availability over investigative chronology. A team of 3 investigators was assigned to monitor the file, but they could only conduct periodic reviews once per year due to the Alaska Cold Case Unit's workload from 2000-2005, handling over 60 long-term unresolved missing persons cases simultaneously with limited staffing. DNA analysis technology of the period rendered most samples collected under harsh weather conditions such as fibers, threads, on glove EV01 and coat EV05 incapable of producing genetic profiles suitable for comparison. Degradation from moisture, cold, and repeated freeze-thaw cycles left the samples virtually worthless for testing by the time the Cold Case Unit received them. For physical evidence, the unit only repackaged items using improved preservation methods to limit long-term damage without deeper analysis. In the first decade, no new witness reports emerged, no financial or travel activity related to the 3 victims occurred, and no confessions or indirect information surfaced. Periodic checks all reached the same conclusion. No new actionable leads. People acquainted with Marissa or appearing on Ethan's relationship list provided no data valuable enough to expand the investigation, and the identity of the threatening letter sender remained completely unidentified due to the lack of high-level ink tracing or pen pressure analysis technology available in later decades. For the initially noted snowmobile tracks, the Cold Case Unit could not backtrack because vehicle registration records from 1999-2001 lacked digitization, making cross-referencing possible only with a specific suspect. Budget constraints also made researching the Chugach Forest nearly impossible, as there was no new data to direct search areas, and post-period SAR deployments were extremely costly at the time. An internal 2006 report noted that the likelihood of the 3 victims surviving was extremely low, but insufficient to reclassify the case as presumed deceased, since no body or remains had been found. This left the case in prolonged legal limbo, neither closed nor grounds for reopening. Continuous review reports affirmed crime not ruled out, crime not identified, and no evidence favors any scenario over others. By the late 2000s, advances in degraded DNA analysis began to offer potential, but the Cold Case Unit still lacked funding to retest old evidence. Thus, for 10 years, the Marissa Caleb Jonah file remained dormant in the AST Cold Case storage in Anchorage, sealed under code CCU 1999-47, virtually unchanged, without progress, and without a single new lead. One of the longest-running triple disappearances in the Cordova area during that era. In the spring of 2010, as the forested mountainous area east of Cordova entered its melt cycle amid an unusually warm season, A geology research team from the University of Alaska Anchorage conducted a survey of shallow ice layer changes along the Chugach forest edge to measure freeze-thaw cycles in the new decade, while coring ice samples at a low depression about 11 kilometers as the crow flies from the Cordova residential area. A team member technician, Michael Dorn, discovered a dark fabric patch pressed under thin ice, just a few centimeters from the ground. Initially, the team thought it was merely old hunting clothing debris, possibly left from a past season. But when Michael used an ice probe to clear the ice layer, he noticed a hood structure and sleeve stitching consistent with adult cold-weather jackets from the late 1990s. The anomaly became clearer when the exposed fabric showed color and weave matching descriptions in a Cordova PD missing persons report referenced by local media in 1999, a coincidence that prompted Michael to note it in the temporary field log and request the team cordon off a 3-meter radius around the area. After confirming the object was intact and not dragged by animals, the team drafted an internal report, took GPS position photos, and sent a non-emergency notification to Alaska State Troopers. The AST Cold Case Unit received the report that same afternoon and immediately noted the description, dark adult jacket with hood, as it matched the coat Marissa Hale was believed to have worn the evening before her disappearance. Although the report could not yet confirm a direct link, the Cold Case Unit classified the event as potential lead Category B and directed the Cordova area investigator to coordinate with the AST Field Response Team to verify the evidence. The next morning, a 3-person team was dispatched to the coordinates provided by the research group and established potential crime scene number 2, dividing the area into 3 control zones: an outer zone to prevent public access, a middle zone to protect surface traces, and an inner zone to define the excavation scope. Upon approaching the fabric, the team determined that the fiber structure and degree of deterioration indicated the object had been in ice for at least 8 to 10 years, matching the accumulation period in the area. This was significant because Cordova's shallow ice typically undergoes short freeze-thaw cycles, rarely preserving light objects intact for so long unless buried in an unusually cold depression. The team used controlled steam thaw equipment to separate the thin ice without tearing the fabric, then recorded all details: length, zipper type, fabric color, scratch marks, and collar structure. When flipping to the inside, they discovered a lining patch with triangular border patterns, details matching Marissa Hale's coat description in the 1999 report. Although not yet conclusive, the team immediately upgraded the event from Category B to Category A potential victim apparel, requiring the file to be reopened under Cold Case Revision Protocol. They drafted a report requesting removal of the evidence using cold preservation, placed in a vacuum-sealed box to prevent degradation as temperatures rose. The scene report noted that the coat showed no tearing consistent with animal dragging, no obvious blood on the outer surface, but possible microcontaminants in the fabric requiring analysis with post-2008 degraded DNA technology. The team also recorded that the discovery location was not on any common travel route for Cordova residents, did not coincide with children's school paths, and was not a licensed hunting area, making it unlikely the item belonged to an outsider. When the report reached the Cold Case Unit in Anchorage, the CCU 1999-47 review team immediately recognized that this evidence could break the decade-long deadlock. They compared photos of the found coat with Marissa's 1998 photos and noted multiple matches in shoulder stitching and old YKK zipper model. Still, per regulations, they could not yet confirm it as victim evidence, but could only establish that potential crime scene number 2 was likely related to the Hale disappearance, requiring continued area lockdown and file reopening for expanded investigation. The discovery of the coat under melting ice, an item never found in the 1999 searches, officially marked the first milestone in over 10 years, indicating the case could progress, forcing the Cold Case Unit to shift the file from unresolved, dormant, to reactivated, lead confirmed, laying the foundation for the next investigative phase. Once the coat was established as evidence potentially related to the 1999 disappearance, Alaska State Troopers deployed a specialized cold environment field technical team to the discovery area to conduct controlled excavation, using low-pressure steam to thaw thin ice layers without damaging buried objects. The team erected a wind-blocking tent and set up a heating system to maintain stable temperatures, then began peeling away ice layers around the coat area, expanding the dig in a layered downward model, centimeter by centimeter, to avoid localized collapse. When the second ice layer was separated, They found smaller loose fabric fragments about 1.2 meters from the coat, indicating this was not a single object, but possibly a cluster of related evidence. Digging 20-25 centimeters deeper, the excavation team encountered an ivory-colored organic structure initially thought to be animal bone. But after thawing the surrounding ice and using high-power LED lights, they identified it as a segment of adult human bone, possibly from the forearm. The area was immediately expanded, and the scene level was updated to possibly human remains, multi-subject. Continuing deeper, about 90 centimeters from the first point, the team discovered a cluster of smaller bones consistent with a child's tibia short length, porous structure, and fracture patterns typical of immature bone. This discovery prompted immediate notification to Anchorage, as CCU 1999-47 involved 2 children missing alongside an adult. Excavation continued under strict control, using specialized ice-cutting tools to create precise borders and avoid fragmenting bones. Over approximately 3 hours, the team recovered additional loose bone fragments, including an adult rib segment, a portion of a child's jaw with 2 baby teeth still attached, and a heavily degraded shoulder bone fragment. All were temporarily coded GS02 to GS17 and placed in cold preservation containers per forensic standards for degraded remains. As deeper ice layers were reached, the bottom of the ice depression revealed a key piece of evidence: a 48 centimeters gray nylon cord with unusual twisting and fold impressions, suggesting it had been tied or secured around something. Nearby was a small rectangular plastic piece, possibly from a small electronic device casing or household accessory, heavily worn after years in ice. Another dark fabric fragment was found caught under a stone, matching the material of a child's winter coat, opening the possibility that the area had once been a concentration of items left or abandoned under unusual circumstances. By the end of the excavation session, technicians created a 3-dimensional scene diagram, marking each piece of evidence's position along coordinate axes to determine the distribution pattern of bones and objects. Initial data showed adult and child bone fragments in a narrow distribution zone, with no signs of being carried away by ice flow, indicating a high likelihood the remains had been in this ice depression from the outset, before being covered in the winter of 1999-2000. The scene lead drafted a report upgrading the area to Crime Scene Number 2, Human Remains Primary Site, replacing the temporary level and officially designating it as an independent forensic scene rather than just a coat discovery point. The report noted: 1. Recovery of remains consistent with 3 individual structures. 2. Presence of non-natural, non-biological evidence. 3. Signs the remains were in their original position rather than moved by animals or weather. Next steps were outlined: wider area lockdown, 24-hour scene security, and transfer of all evidence to the forensic lab for degraded DNA identification using post-208 technology. The recovery of remains from melting ice, the first breakthrough after over a decade, without progress officially turned Crime Scene Number 2 into a pivotal turning point, with the potential to re-establish the entire sequence of events in the 1999 disappearance case. When all bone samples and evidence from Crime Scene Number 2 were transferred to the Anchorage Forensic Pathology Lab, the degraded DNA analysis team began the identification process according to 2011 standards, at which point mini-STR and mitoDNA technologies were sufficiently advanced to resolve biological material buried under ice for over a decade. First, technicians cleaned the bone surfaces using an enzyme solution and UV irradiation to remove environmental contaminants, then took drill samples from the dense bone layer at minimally damaged locations, a segment of adult forearm bone, a child's tibia, and a jaw fragment still containing 2 baby teeth. Each sample underwent an improved extraction process tailored for cold degraded tissue, employing buffer concentration enhancement and extended lysis times to maximize recoverable DNA yield. The initial analysis results showed high fragmentation levels in the recovered samples, making traditional STR profiling impossible. So the lab switched to mini-STR, a shortened version that amplifies extremely short DNA segments, the only viable option for long-term frozen samples. When mini-STR analysis was run, 3 distinct genetic profiles emerged. One profile exhibited characteristics of an adult female, while the other 2 were consistent with prepubescent children. Concurrently, the team conducted mitoDNA analysis to check for maternal line kinship, as mitochondrial DNA is more stable in cold environments and can persist even when nuclear DNA has severely degraded. The mitoDNA from all three samples displayed the same haplotype, indicating that the three individuals shared a mother or a direct maternal line. This was the first major breakthrough directly linking the adult bone to the two child skeletons. The lab then compared the mini-STR results against reference samples collected in 1999, stored in case files CCU 1999-47, which included hair and toothbrush samples from Marissa Hale, as well as cheek swab samples from her two sons, Caleb and Jonah, obtained from pediatric records. Although the 1999 samples were old and did not meet modern storage standards, the team was still able to extract sufficient data for comparison. When matching software was run, the results showed a high degree of concordance between the unidentified adult sample and Marissa Hale's reference at 12 out of 13 mini-STR loci, exceeding the 99.87% probability threshold sufficient for positive identification under Alaska regulations at the time, 2011. The two child bone samples matched Caleb's and Jonah's profiles respectively through mother-child relationship modeling and by comparing each child's distinctive genotype. Caleb had a characteristic allele at locus D2S441, while Jonah showed smaller DNA fragment characteristics due to his young age. The final report submitted to the cold case unit stated, mini-STR and mitoDNA results confirm with high confidence that the bone samples recovered from crime scene number 2 belonged to Marissa Hale, Caleb Hale, and Jonah Hale. With the DNA identification confirmed, the legal status of the more than a decade-old missing persons case immediately changed. Per regulations, once positively identified remains are found, the case must be reclassified from missing persons unresolved to homicide investigation active, unless evidence supports death by accident or natural causes, something crime scene number 2 provided no basis for. AST reopened the file under new designation H 2011-47A and assembled a special task force to reevaluate all prior data in the new context. In the status change report, the forensic team analyzed that 1. The location of the remains was outside any reasonable travel route for Cordova residents. 2. All three bodies were found clustered together, ruling out random wilderness accident scenarios. And 3. The presence of nylon cord and plastic fragments in the ice cavity was inconsistent with an accident death scenario. This elevated the likelihood of third-party involvement to a high level. The DNA identification event also prompted AST's legal division to reassess previously dismissed evidence, including threatening letters, traces found in the Hale home in 1999, and inconsistencies in Ethan's statements. A key factor was that once reclassified as a homicide investigation, the legal restrictions on handling missing persons files no longer applied, allowing new DNA sampling from involved parties, recovery of old phone data, and expanded investigation into personal relationships and criminal motives. An internal memo noted, the 2011 DNA results represent a pivotal turning point, forcing a complete shift in investigative direction. The question is no longer where did they go, but who took them there and how. Upon internal disclosure of the identification, the cold case unit commander ordered a standardized timeline reconstruction based on the confirmed deaths and initiated high-level forensic analysis of the nylon cord and fabric fibers recovered with the remains. That same day, the file was reported to the regional prosecutor's office, laying the groundwork for full criminal investigation transition. The DNA results not only confirmed that the three victims had perished in 1999, but also transformed a missing persons case spanning over a decade into an official homicide, prompting the Alaska State Troopers to restart the entire investigation with a focus on identifying the perpetrator in the new context. After the 2011 DNA results established that the three sets of remains belonged to Marissa, Caleb, and Jonah Hale, the Alaska State Troopers shifted the investigation toward tracking the movements and activities of related individuals on the day of the disappearance, particularly Ethan Hale, the last person known to have seen the three victims alive. With advances in historical cell tower data analysis and the ability to recover connection logs from carrier archive files dating back to 1999, the technical investigation team was tasked with re-extracting all mobile signal data related to Ethan's personal phone number during the window from 4:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. on the day of the incident. Although late 1990s storage systems were incomplete, portions of old cell tower records still existed in billing backup archives, enabling recovery of background connection pings that users could not manually delete. The forensics team began by reconstructing the 1999 coverage map for the Cordova area, combining original Alaska wireless network data with inherited carrier archives. They identified 4 primary towers serving Cordova and the routes toward Tugich at the time: Cordova Main Tower, Eyak Ridge Tower, Mile 7 Tower, and Copper River East Tower, each with 120-degree sector coverage. After recovering the cell tower logs tied to Ethan's phone number, the team discovered a sequence of registered background connections at 5:42 a.m. Ethan's phone pinged the Cordova Main Tower, consistent with his statement that he left home around 5:40 to go to the gym. However, anomalies appeared in subsequent pings at 6:18 a.m. and 6:24 a.m. The device no longer connected to Cordova Main or Eyak Ridge Towers, but instead registered on the western sector of Copper River East Tower, a tower located farther northeast, near the entry to the forest route that the 1999 SAR team had searched but not extended far enough. Digital forensics further expanded analysis by recovering surviving metadata, including timestamps, input device IDs, and file creation paths. Although much metadata had degraded due to time and suboptimal preservation, some fields remained usable, particularly the persistent string G2K-KBD alphash, the identifier for the original keyboard bundled with the Gateway 2000 seized by Cordova PD from the Hale home in 1999. This code was physically etched on the device and logged by firmware into metadata during document creation, a feature not widely advertised but present in some late 90s high-end models. This enabled direct confirmation that the threatening letter draft had been composed on the Hale household computer, not an external device. Forensics also detected traces of a dial-up email session via an account registered to Ethan, including carrier IP logs and billing authentication codes. Although original email content was gone, header remnants included the string X original from Armodo99, a username that had appeared in one of the faxed threatening letters. To confirm relevance, the team used remaining TOC data on the drive to reconstruct editing sessions and map keystroke sequences. Results showed typing errors, corrections, and paragraph indentation patterns matching Ethan's documented composition habits from his 1999 written statements. Forensics concluded that at least one draft of a threatening letter was found on the hard drive belonging to Ethan's computer, proving direct association between the drafting origin and his equipment. This was the first sufficiently robust data to link the previously suspect-only threatening letters to a plausible author. When combined with the cell tower reconstruction, the investigation team observed that 2 independent data sets converged on the same individual, with both opportunity and means related to the disappearance. The Digital Forensics Final Report 21-2011 concluded: 1. The recovered threatening letter draft matched the motif of sent letters. 2. Metadata confirmed the file was created on the Hale household computer, tied to Ethan's keyboard device. 3. Ethan's dial-up account was used in a login session near the time the first threatening letter appeared in 1998. 4. These findings provide legal grounds to classify the threatening letters as evidence potentially constituting motive and preparatory conduct, rather than merely peripheral indicators. With the recovery of these drafts, the investigation gained a crucial connecting piece, laying the foundation for reevaluating the entire context and Ethan's behavior in the period leading up to the disappearance, elevating his level of suspicion and requiring case expansion into tracing preparatory criminal conduct. When forensics data from the old computer in cell towers compelled case expansion into movement behavior analysis, Alaska State Troopers issued a late witness appeal, a tactic commonly used in cold cases when new technology and context allow re-examination of previously dismissed details. The appeal was disseminated through Cordova community channels, hunter groups, snowmobile clubs, and winter ranger personnel. Unexpectedly, just 3 weeks later, AST received a response from a longtime resident, Victor Rudd, 58, a mechanic who had used snowmobiles extensively around the Copper River area since the late 1990s. Victor stated that he had seen a red-gray snowmobile traveling unusually early one morning in December 1999, very close to the date the Hale family was reported missing, but at the time he did not consider it noteworthy, as many in Cordova use snowmobiles during heavy snow periods. However, after reading about the 2010 ice melt remains discovery and the 2011 case reopening, he realized the travel route referenced by AST matched the location where he had seen the snowmobile that day. Although uncertain of the exact date, Victor clearly recalled environmental details: very early morning, still dim, light snowfall, and northeast wind description perfectly matching Cordova meteorological data for the morning of the disappearance. Data indicated the phone had to be within a 3 to 5 kilometer radius of Copper River East Tower to register a matching RSSI signal strength. This area did not overlap with the route to the gym or any urban itinerary. When overlaid on 1999 maps, the 6018 and 6024 ping locations were near the edge of the trail system leading to what was later identified as crime scene number 2, where the remains were found. The team cross-referenced this with Ethan's original statement. He claimed to have been continuously at Fireweed Fitness Gym from 6 to pre-0 to 6 to 50 a.m., never leaving the premises, and making multiple calls home because Marissa wasn't answering. Yet the cell tower report showed that at 6:33 a.m., another automatic ping from Ethan's numbers still routed through Copper River East Tower, not Cordova, Maine, creating a serious contradiction with his claim of being at the gym in town. The investigation team compiled a comparison table of outgoing call logs versus cell tower pings. The calls Ethan made from 6:33 to 6:52 a.m. were all routed through Copper River East Tower, meaning his device was not in town at that time. This demolished the earlier hypothesis that Ethan lacked sufficient time to travel far and return home by nearly 7 a.m. Forensics modeled possible travel scenarios if Ethan left home at 5:40 a.m. as claimed. Instead of heading straight to the gym, he could have driven northeast along a minor route parallel to Copper River Highway, reaching near the Eyak Forest by 6:15 a.m. This raised a critical question. Why was his device present precisely in the area later identified as the crime scene? The team also assessed 1999 cell tower accuracy, while less precise than modern GPS. Copper River East Tower's Dummers Ichwar radius was narrow enough to confirm the device's presence in the expanded forested area toward the ice slope where the jacket was found. Combined with repeated ping timing, the team concluded that Ethan's device did not merely enter coverage randomly, but likely remained in the area for at least 10 to 12 minutes, based on ping intervals and signal strength. This directly contradicted his statement that he spent the entire period at the gym. When the cell tower reconstruction report was submitted to the cold case unit, the unit commander immediately identified it as having legal evidentiary value, as it demonstrated a material discrepancy between the statement and the device's actual location, especially when combined with the body discovery. This data became the foundation for restructuring the 1999 timeline to include active involvement by the closest associated individual. After re-evaluating Ethan's calling behavior from 6:33 to 6:52 a.m., forensics noted that the dropped calls and fluctuating signal strength matched the mountainous Copper River terrain, where signal attenuation is greater than in urban Cordova, further validating the tower data over routing error hypotheses. The final report concluded: 1. Ethan's device was not near the gym during the times he claimed. 2. The device appeared in the vicinity of crime scene number 2. 3. Ethan's statement contained material contradictions. With the recovered cell tower data, the investigation team was compelled to re-examine all 1999 statements and elevate the level of suspicion toward Ethan, opening new avenues to explore his potential direct involvement in the victim's initial movements at the time of disappearance. When the 1999 cell tower data showed Ethan's device near Copper River at a time coinciding with the 3 victims' disappearance window, Alaska State Troopers expanded the investigation to encompass all digital resources related to Ethan, including old storage devices previously sealed and placed in evidence storage from the initial investigation. Among them were a Gateway 2000 desktop computer and a separate 4GB IDE hard drive, which in 1999 could not be fully extracted due to technological limitations. In 2011, using degraded disk reading techniques, Aztec Digital Forensics deployed specialized tools to create a bit-by-bit image of the drive, then applied data carving methods to recover deleted segments that had not been fully overwritten. Initially, examiners found old email folder structures from Eudora Software and POP3 archive files that Ethan had used while working for the local pastoral office. These files contained email headers, fragmented POP packets, and occasionally partial message bodies. More significantly, forensics discovered a hidden temporary folder named TMP MPower Mail-D Raft, containing multiple deleted drafts from late 1998 and early 1999. Among the recovered files was a plain text document whose content closely matched the style of the threatening letters sent to the Hale home before Marissa and the two children disappeared. Passages in the draft echoed similar threatening motifs such as, "Stop now or there will be consequences," and "I know your schedule," which had led 1999 police to suspect the writer had intimate knowledge of the family's routines. More importantly, he confirmed the snowmobile was traveling alone, without escort, unloaded, and moving slower than normal near the forest edge, as if the rider were searching for a trail turnoff. When asked why he remembered this particular machine, Victor cited a technical detail. The taillight had a red hue shifted toward pink due to scratched or aftermarket replacement lens glass. In 1999, few snowmobiles in the area had this characteristic. The investigation team immediately compared the witness information with images of Ethan's snowmobile, photographed and documented by Cordova PD in 1999. Ethan's vehicle, a late 90s Polaris SKS Indeed, had a temporarily replaced taillight after a prior failure, producing the pink-shifted red glow the witness described. This was the first match between Ethan's vehicle and the new testimony. Victor further explained that he had been about 30 meters from the main route, repairing his own sled's tie-downs when he saw the snowmobile pass. The proximity allowed him to observe the body style, but not clearly identify the rider, who wore a thick hooded parka standard for Cordova winters. When shown a map and asked to mark his position, the spot lay directly on a secondary turnoff leading to the ice cavity where the remains were found, a route rarely used by locals due to its narrowness, steepness, and numerous submerged rocks. Yet this route was shorter than the main road for anyone seeking to access the deep eastern forest undetected. Prior cell tower data placed Ethan's device near Copper River East Tower at 6018 and 6024 a.m. in 1999. Overlaying Victor's testimony with the 2011 cell tower map revealed significant alignment. Victor estimated the snowmobile passed a little after 6, falling within the time frame of the key pings. Notably, the direction he described from Cordova toward the forest matched the trajectory indicated by cell tower analysis showing Ethan's device departing the residential area. To verify reliability, AST conducted cognitive re-interviewing to assess memory distortion over time. Victor demonstrated high consistency across multiple descriptions, especially regarding taillight color, travel direction, and speed. His refusal to positively identify the rider further enhanced the statement's objectivity, showing no subjective attribution. The team later reviewed Victor's 1999 snowmobile repair log, which contained a brief entry dated 9/2/1999, saw lone red sled on East Line early odd timing. Though lacking an exact day, this was a compelling corroborative fragment indicating he truly observed the snowmobile near the disappearance timeframe. By correlating the data, the team constructed a technical scenario. If the snowmobile rider left the Hale home around 5:55:56 a.m., reached Victor's position by 6:12:56:17 a.m., and proceeded deeper into the ice cavity area shortly after, the timing aligned with Ethan's device's 6018 and 6024 a.m. cell tower pings. This new witness not only filled gaps in the original timeline previously reliant solely on Ethan's statement and indirect 1999 data, but also provided independent third-party corroboration directly, connecting Ethan's vehicle to the movement direction toward the new crime scene. Forensics subsequently confirmed that the route Victor described fell within the weak coverage zone of Copper River East Tower, consistent with Ethan's ping pattern. The investigation team assessed that Victor's testimony was the first field-based piece of evidence establishing the presence of a vehicle matching Ethan's in the critical time corridor, aligning with cell tower reconstruction and crime scene number 2 location, thereby substantially increasing the probability of criminally relevant movement direction. With a witness emerging after 12 years, the cold case shifted from purely digital analysis to integrated human data synthesis, creating a foundation for direct inquiry into Ethan's movements on the morning of the disappearance. After the new witness statement reinforced suspicions about Ethan's movement route on the morning of the disappearance, the Alaska State Troopers expanded the investigation into the motive data group, a necessary step, as technical and field evidence began to converge. The first focus was on finances, particularly life insurance records related to Marissa and the two children. While reviewing civil records in Cordova, the investigative team discovered that just 4 months before the disappearance date, Ethan had taken out 2 new life insurance policies, one worth $350,000 for Marissa and one worth $50,000 for each child, with himself as the sole beneficiary. Notably, in the application records, Ethan declared a higher household income than actual, and the insurance company approved quickly due to no apparent medical risk indicators. When cross-referencing timelines, AST noted that the insurance applications were submitted approximately 3 weeks after Ethan began regular email exchanges with Tara Finch, the individual identified as having had an affair with him. In 1999, the investigative team proceeded to collect all communication data between Ethan and Tara, including recovered emails from old hard drives, fax copies, appointment logs, and call records retained by the carrier. Some of their emails belonged to a deleted group but were recovered using data carving technology. The rest were preserved by Tara in an old account she had not deleted. The content showed frequent discussions about the possibility of changing their lives, a fresh start, and leaving behind what binds them, though without direct mention of divorce. However, one email timestamped October 1999 clearly stated, "I can't do anything until everything is settled," which forensics determined was sent by Ethan. At that time, Alaska did not approve easy divorce proceedings without evidence of separation or compelling legal grounds. AST consulted the legal department and determined that if Ethan divorced, his income would not suffice to support 2 households, and selling the house or dividing assets would cause him to lose most of his financial benefits. Conversely, if Marissa and the 2 children were no longer present, he would receive the full life insurance proceeds without having to go through divorce proceedings, a factor that could create a clear financial motive. The investigative team continued analyzing Ethan's bank transactions from 1998-1999 and noted several unusual payments, costs for renting a cabin for a trip he claimed was business travel, but which coincided with periods of intimate email exchanges with Tara, expenses for gifts sent to Anchorage, and a large cash withdrawal 2 days before the disappearance, unexplained in any statements. To assess the possibility of an emotional motive, the team arranged a supplemental interview with Tara Finch as a witness in 2011. Tara stated that although she and Ethan had a close relationship, she was completely unaware of Ethan purchasing life insurance or any plan to end the marriage by means other than divorce. However, electronic data and appointment logs showed Ethan repeatedly suggesting possibilities of full future custody, no more ties, and starting over somewhere else, leading AST to assess that this relationship may have played a significant role in forming a motive. When the investigative team overlaid financial data with the event timeline, they identified a critical match. Marissa's life insurance policy received final approval just 2 weeks before the disappearance and took effect immediately with no waiting period. This heightened suspicions that Ethan may have calculated the timing in advance. Furthermore, the premiums were paid with Ethan's credit card, while Marissa was unaware of the policies confirmed through statements from Marissa's mother and sister, as well as bank statements showing Ethan as the sole controller of the transactions. In-depth analysis by the forensic accounting team revealed that Ethan's financial situation in 1999 was quite strained. Credit cards maxed out, car loan 2 months overdue, and spending related to Tara increasing financial pressure. In that context, the investigative team noted, receiving a large insurance payout would resolve all of Ethan's short-term economic difficulties and even create financial abundance if he relocated elsewhere. The official motive analysis concluded, 1. Ethan had a clear financial motive due to the newly purchased insurance shortly before the disappearance. 2. Ethan had an emotional motive related to Tara Finch, evidenced by high-frequency email exchanges, meeting logs, and unusual spending. 3. Both financial and emotional motive groups appeared concurrently in the period immediately preceding the disappearance, consistent with the behavioral pattern of preparation in homicides driven by economic gain combined with personal factors. The investigative team assessed this motive group as strong enough to be classified as motive primary, placing Ethan in the position of a potential suspect as technical and field data increasingly pointed in the same direction. As financial, digital, and witness statement data converged to strengthen suspicions against Ethan, the Alaska State Troopers shifted focus to full forensic examination of all evidence collected at crime scene number 2 to establish a direct physical link between the suspect and the body recovery site. The Anchorage Forensic Laboratory received the nylon tie, loose fabric fibers, plastic fragments, and mud samples adhering to the evidence for multi-layered analysis. DNA, materials, morphology, structural comparison. First, the forensic biology team extracted DNA from the nylon tie. Because the tie had been under ice for over 10 years, its surface was abraded and mineral contaminated. Technicians used enzymatic lysis combined with particle separation to recover residual DNA embedded deep in the fiber grooves. Initial results revealed 2 DNA profiles, mitochondrial DNA belonging to Marissa, and a nuclear DNA sample that did not match any of the 3 victims. The foreign sample was compared to the case's reference database, including Ethan's reference sample collected in 1999 and reconfirmed in 2011. Mini-STR analysis showed a match at 1313 loci between the sample on the tie and Ethan's DNA, achieving scientific confidence above 99.999.99%, meeting legal standards to establish the suspect's presence on the evidence. This was the first time in the case that direct biological evidence linked Ethan to evidence at the body recovery location. The materials forensics team then examined the loose fabric fibers recovered from the same ice layer. Several dark charcoal fibers exhibited a fine ripstop weave structure. Under electron microscopy, the fabric showed a characteristic 4x4 weave pattern typical of the North Cascade men's outer jacket line from 1998-1999, the type Ethan owned and claimed to have discarded after it tore during a 2000 storage cleanup. Forensics retrieved property photos documented by Cordova PD in 1999 and found that the jacket Ethan wore during an interview was indeed a black charcoal North Cascade 4x4 weave version with the same distinctive shoulder stitching flaw. The examination team conducted fiber comparison using F-tire, showing that the absorption spectrum of the seam fibers nearly perfectly matched the reference sample from Ethan's jacket, confirming material origin compatible with the suspect's clothing. This created a second layer of connection between Ethan and the scene, an indirect but technically strong presence. Next, the morphology analysis team examined the evidence ensemble nylon tie, fabric fibers, and bone distribution to evaluate the mechanism of death or body transport. Based on the tie's position, twists, and folds, specialists assessed that the tie was most likely knotted around wrists or forearms to restrict movement, rather than used as a weight-securing line. The evenly repeated folds along its length indicated symmetrical pulling force, consistent with binding or restraint behavior. Fibers from Ethan's jacket appeared only about 70 centimeters from the tie within the same ice sediment layer, inconsistent with the random drift hypothesis. According to shallow-layer ice movement models, light objects typically disperse widely over each freeze-thaw cycle. The concentration of multiple evidence items related to 2 subjects within a narrow ice pocket implied they were placed or deposited at the same time. Before ice formation, the field expert reconstructed a horizontal diagram and noted that the tie was positioned exactly where it could have been attached to an adult arm, while the children's bones lay nearby in a cluster contrary to all accident death models. The forensics team concluded that the evidence ensemble was consistent with a restraint mechanism using the tie before the bodies were brought to the ice pocket area. Notably, the fabric fibers matching the suspect's jacket could only have been shed if the wearer was directly involved in moving or handling the bodies. This reinforced the hypothesis that Ethan was present at the scene when the bodies were placed into the ice pocket, a circumstance of major legal significance. A final summary report was delivered to the investigative team with 3 conclusions. 1. Ethan's DNA appeared on the nylon tie alongside Marissa's DNA, establishing direct contact between the suspect and the restraint device. 2. Fabric fibers matching Ethan's jacket reinforced his presence at the body disposal location. 3. Both the tie and fibers were distributed in a pattern compatible with intentional behavior, not accident or environmental dispersion. With these results, the investigation shifted to a strongly directive phase as crime scene number doc. 2 evidence not only confirmed the victims but began to identify the perpetrator through physical relationships that could not be explained in any other lawful manner. When the forensic results from crime scene number 2 confirmed Ethan's physical presence at the body disposal area and seriously contradicted his 1999 statements, the Alaska State Troopers Cold Case Unit decided to proceed with direct reinterrogation. Since Ethan had left Alaska years earlier and was living in Springfield, Missouri, AST coordinated with the Missouri State Highway Patrol to set up a properly video-recorded interview room. 3 AST investigators flew to Missouri carrying the full 2011 timeline comparison documents, cell tower analysis results, DNA, and new physical evidence reports. The interview was scheduled in advance under the guise of cold case file update, but was actually intended to assess Ethan's cognitive response, explanatory ability, and consistency when confronted with new data. Right in the opening phase, the investigator asked a simple question: "Do you have anything to add to your 1999 statement?" A technique designed to let the subject voluntarily reveal information. Ethan maintained his original account that he left home for the gym at 5:40 a.m. and did not leave the gym until around 6:50. The investigative team then moved to the cell tower information, presenting a comparison chart showing Ethan's device pings on the Copper River East Tower coverage area during the 6:33 a.m. window. When asked to explain why his phone appeared more than 10 kilometers northeast of the gym, Ethan replied that the system back then might have had errors, or someone might have borrowed the phone. The investigator immediately countered with facts. At that time, Cordova had only 4 active cell towers, and the misrouting rate was extremely low. Moreover, Ethan's statement claimed he kept the phone in his pocket the entire time at the gym, so no one could have borrowed it. Ethan gave no clear response, only repeating, "I don't know." When the team shifted to old computer forensics data, presenting the recovered threatening draft email with metadata matching a device in a Hale home, Ethan denied ever writing a threatening letter. However, when asked to explain why the content, writing style, and typing errors matched his documented drafting habits from the 1999 statement, Ethan only said that someone else used the computer. The investigator pointed out that the TMP N*Mile N*DRAF test folder was under Ethan's single-user account and access required his password. Tension began to appear. Ethan shifted position, avoided eye contact, and gave shorter answers. The critical phase of the interview began when investigators presented the nylon tie recovered from crime scene number 2, along with a DNA report showing the foreign sample on the tie matched Ethan's DNA at 1313 loci. When asked, "Can you explain why your DNA is on evidence found with the bodies of your wife and 2 children?" Ethan paused for several seconds, then replied, "I don't know what that tie is," before shifting to arguments that DNA could have transferred, police handled the tie, or the sample could be cross-contaminated. The investigator immediately rebutted that the victim's DNA and Ethan's DNA were in separate layers within the tie's grooves, meaning distinct contact times and impossible lab cross-contamination. When Ethan was asked to clarify why fibers from his jacket appeared in the same ice layer as the bodies, he said he no longer had that jacket since 2000, but could not explain why the fiber sample perfectly matched in FTR spectrum and weave pattern. The contradictions grew larger when the team asked about the timing of his claim to have discarded the jacket, while documentary photos showed him wearing the same jacket in an interview at Cordova, PD several months after he said he had gotten rid of it. Loss of control over the statement began when the investigator asked, "Did you use the snowmobile that morning?" Ethan answered firmly, "No." The investigative team presented the new witness, Victor Rudd's statement, describing very specific mismatched rear light colors on Ethan's snowmobile. Ethan shifted from denial to attempting explanations that many vehicles in Cordova had similar lights, but when investigators produced Ethan's 1998 snowmobile repair records documenting the exact light issue Victor described, Ethan offered no response. The interview entered a phase of nonverbal response evaluation. Ethan began changing breathing patterns, repeatedly touching his collar and looking down when asked to explain the timeline. When the team presented the cell tower map and pointed out that he would have had to be near the ice pocket area at the exact time of the victim's time of death, Ethan said, "I remember being at the gym. If the data is wrong then I don't know what to say." The 3 investigators noted in the record that Ethan displayed 3 classic signs of cognitive inconsistency. Absolute denials without offering alternative mechanisms. 2. Repeated use of could be, might be structures to create escape routes. 3. Attempts to downplay evidence value without detailed technical rebuttals. Particularly when finally asked, "Did you go into the Copper River area that morning?" Ethan replied, "I don't remember." This answer directly contradicted his 1999 statement that he never left the gym and opened a cognitive gap suggesting the original statement may have been fabricated. The interview ended after more than 3 hours with an internal assessment. Ethan provided no reasonable explanation for the DNA on the tie, the fiber presence, cell tower location, snowmobile match, or threatening email drafts. The official record noted, the subject could no longer sustain his original statement. The level of contradiction has reached the threshold of serious suspicion. This was a pivotal step in redirecting the investigation toward a criminal conclusion phase. After the re-interview in Missouri, in which Ethan could not explain the presence of his DNA on the tie, the match of fibers to his personal jacket, the cell tower pings locating him near crime scene number 2, or the threatening email drafts traced to his computer, the Alaska State Troopers Cold Case Unit entered the phase of compiling the legal case file to seek an arrest warrant under Alaska criminal evidence standards. This process required restructuring all evidence into independent groups, standardizing chain of custody, and demonstrating logical linkages between data layers without relying on subjective judgments. AST divided the evidence system into 5 main groups. Group 1, DNA. The forensics team standardized many STR and MEDO DNA reports, confirming Ethan's DNA appeared on the nylon tie alongside Marissa's DNA. With 99.999.99% confidence, the report also clearly stated that the foreign sample was not on a cross-contaminated surface but embedded deep in fiber grooves, proving direct contact at the time the tie was used. This group also included fiber comparison results from the scene with Ethan's jacket, establishing the suspect's presence at the body disposal location. Group 2, Timeline. The technology analysis team standardized all cell tower data, radar pings, and outgoing call logs, creating a real-time positioning map showing Ethan's device near the Copper River East Tower during the 6:118-6:33 a.m. window, in complete contradiction to his statement of being at the gym the entire time. This timeline was reinforced by the new witness Victor Rudd's statement describing a snowmobile with characteristics matching Ethan's vehicle entering the forested area at a time aligning with the cell tower pings. Group 3, Scene Evidence. The nylon tie, fabric fibers, plastic fragments, and bone distribution structure were presented in the file as a chain of physical links proving the mechanism of restraint and body transport. The in-depth morphology report stated clearly that the evidence distribution was inconsistent with accident or natural dispersion and could only occur if someone deliberately placed the bodies in the ice pocket before ice formation. Group 4, Motive. The financial investigation team standardized data showing Ethan purchased 2 life insurance policies totaling $450,000 within 4 months before Marissa and the 2 children disappeared, with himself as sole beneficiary. This data was combined with personal relationship analysis showing an affair with Tara Finch and email exchanges implying resolving ties. AST demonstrated that financial and emotional motives appeared simultaneously before the crime occurred, consistent with patterns of premeditated criminal behavior. Group 5, Digital Data. Digital forensics presented recovered threatening email drafts from Ethan's hard drive, with metadata proving the file was composed on a computer in the Hale home and using Ethan's keyboard. Dial-up login data also traced back to his personal account. The file emphasized that the threatening email was no longer merely peripheral, but had become evidence of preparatory behavior intended to disadvantage the victim. After classifying the 5 evidence groups, AST began standardizing chain of custody for each item from 1999 to 2011. This extremely critical step ensured no legal vulnerabilities that could result in evidence exclusion at trial. Investigators reviewed transfer signatures, sealing records, containers, storage temperatures, and all unsealing instances. For the nylon tie, they confirmed all 3 phases: recovery at crime scene number 2, cold transport to the lab, and storage in AST evidence vault hall meeting standards. For the fibers, evidence was compared in 2 forms: original sample and FTR analysis sample, both resealed after each step. The continuous chain of custody record showed no interruptions that could raise cross-contamination concerns. The arrest warrant application was drafted in over 80 pages, with investigators required to prove the evidence exceeded the probable cause threshold, meaning sufficient reasonable grounds to believe Ethan committed the murders of Marissa, Caleb, and Jonah. Each section was reinforced with timeline charts, cell tower maps, 3D scene diagrams, DNA analysis citations, material comparison blocks, and excerpts from 2011 interviews showing serious inconsistencies in Ethan's statements. The Alaska State Prosecutor's Office conducted a final review and requested 2 additions. 1. Explanation of the link between the snowmobile and access route to crime scene number Dole. 2. Description of a reasonable mechanism for placing the bodies in the ice pocket within the narrow time window. AST added a movement model based on the average speed of a 1998 Polaris SKS snowmobile, proving the suspect had sufficient time to travel from the Hale home to the ice pocket location and return to Cordova before 7 a.m. Once the entire content was finalized, the file was submitted to the Alaska Superior Court. After reviewing the 5 evidence groups, finding no chain of custody gaps, and determining that the linkages between data layers were strong, consistent, and incapable of innocent explanation, the judge approved the arrest warrant for Ethan Hale, opening the next phase of the prosecution process. After the Alaska Superior Court judge approved the arrest warrant based on a file consisting of 5 groups of evidence: DNA, timeline, physical evidence from site number 25th, 2, financial emotional motive, and digital tracking data from the computer, Alaska State Troopers immediately forwarded the warrant to the U.S. Marshal Service to execute the arrest in Missouri under the federal process for a suspect wanted for murder in another state. At 6:40 a.m. on an early August 2011 day, 4 U.S. Marshals approached Ethan's rental home in Springfield using a knock-and-announce procedure, while simultaneously blocking the 2 rear escape routes to prevent flight. When Ethan opened the door, he was ordered to step out of the threshold, turn around, and place his hands behind his head. The agent clearly read the arrest warrant. At the request of the state of Alaska, you are under arrest for 3 counts of first-degree murder. Ethan appeared stunned but did not resist. He asked, because of what happened in 1999, but received no further response beyond being handcuffed and placed into a specialized vehicle. Personal property seized on the spot included his phone, laptop, and identification documents, all properly documented under chain of custody procedures for transfer to AST after extradition. Meanwhile, 2 cold case unit investigators present in Missouri completed the subject handoff procedures, signed the federal transfer paperwork, and conducted a brief Miranda interview. But Ethan declined to answer. After 48 hours in custody at Greene County Jail, Missouri held an extradition hearing to determine whether the suspect would contest extradition. Ethan, through his Missouri public defender, stated he would not contest extradition, allowing the process to proceed quickly. Under the Federal Extradition Act, Alaska was required to send personnel to receive him within 30 days. AST arranged for 2 investigators and 1 prisoner transport officer to conduct the escort via commercial flight with movement restriction measures applied. Ethan was secured with concealed handcuffs and a specialized restraint belt to avoid drawing attention, then transported to Anchorage, where U.S. Marshals handed him over to the Alaska Department of Corrections. Upon arrival at Anchorage Correctional Complex, Ethan's inmate file was reopened under case number H. 2011-47A, directly related to 3 counts of first-degree murder: murder in the first degree against Marissa Hale, murder in the first degree against Caleb Hale, and murder in the first degree against Caleb Hale, and murder in the first degree against Jonah Hale. Additionally, the state prosecutor intended to apply the aggravating factor of multiple victims under Alaska Statute 12.55.125 Pine. During intake, Ethan was informed of his constitutional rights, right to counsel, and right to remain silent. However, AST did not seek further statements at this point, as their prosecution strategy required ensuring any statements from the suspect occurred under strict legal oversight at upcoming hearings. Concurrently with the arrest, the Alaska State Prosecutor held a closed briefing with AST representatives to establish the scope of prosecution. Based on the evidence file already approved by the court, the prosecution confirmed that the 3 murders would be consolidated into a single indictment, as the evidence showed the acts occurred consecutively within the same chain of events on the night and early morning of the disappearance. They also decided against separating the cases into individual indictments to maintain the continuity of the timeline and avoid providing a strategic advantage to the defense. In addition to the 3 first-degree murder charges, the prosecution considered lesser charges such as tampering with evidence and abuse of a corpse, but chose to keep these in supplemental file materials for potential later use after assessing them. Initial jury response. Once the prosecution file was finalized, Ethan was placed in high-security pretrial detention, pending arraignment, the first appearance to hear the charges. The entire process of arrest, extradition, and intake was documented by camera and official logs to ensure no procedural gaps that the defense could exploit. This marked the first time in over a decade that the name Ethan Hale shifted from person of interest to defendant, facing 3 counts of first-degree murder supported by a tightly constructed evidence system from DNA, digital data, and crime scene physical evidence to witness statements, meeting Alaska's prosecution standards. After Ethan was extradited to Anchorage and formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, the Alaska State Prosecutor's Office and Alaska State Troopers entered the trial preparation phase of process, requiring interagency coordination among forensics, digital analysis, environmental analysis, cell tower experts, and crime scene reconstruction teams. The focus of this phase was to re-examine all physical evidence to ensure it met admissibility standards under the Alaska Rules of Evidence, while organizing the presentation order, so the jury could see the tight connections across evidence layers. The forensics team began by re-reviewing the chain of custody for the nylon binding cord, fabric fibers, plastic fragments, bone samples, and all evidence collected at site number 2. Each item was resealed, photographed in high resolution, and cross-checked against 2010-2011 records to confirm no changes in physical condition. Forensic reports were rewritten into court-presentable versions, clearly separating steps: sample collection, preservation, DNA analysis, mini-STR and mito-DNA comparison, FTR material analysis, and morphological reconstruction. The goal was to show the jury that each step strictly followed scientific protocols with no possibility of cross-contamination or error. In parallel, the prosecution prepared testimony from 7 forensic experts: degraded DNA specialist, fiber analysis expert, bone distribution morphologist, glacial environment modeler, cell tower specialist, digital forensics expert, and the lead investigator for site number 2. Each expert was required to draft testimony in understandable language while preserving scientific weight, emphasizing features inexplicable by innocents, especially Ethan's DNA match on the binding cord and the presence of fibers from Ethan's jacket in the same ice layer as the remains. The prosecution devoted significant time to developing a strategy for using a 3D simulation model of site number 2 and the travel route, as the visual simulation was seen as a powerful tool to help the jury see the crime mechanism in a rugged, ice-covered area hidden for years. The 3D reconstruction team used LiDAR data from the Copper River region, 1999 SAR maps, 2011 drone data, and GPS points recorded during recovery to build a high-resolution model recreating terrain, ice flow direction, jacket location, binding cord, and bone cluster. In the model, the prosecution could demonstrate to the jury that the ice crevasse where the bodies were found was not an area of random public movement and could only be conveniently accessed by snowmobile matching. Witness Victor Rudd's statement and cell tower data placing Ethan's device. Alongside physical evidence and models, the prosecution prepared lay witnesses, 1999 neighbors, newspaper delivery person Navarro, Mrs. Park, Mr. Dermott, and new witness Victor. Each was re-interviewed to ensure consistency and reminded of the rule against discussing the case with other witnesses to avoid allegations of collusion. The prosecution also had to re-evaluate the reliability of witness statements after 12 years' a legal requirement for delayed testimony. Based on cognitive assessment, Victor's testimony was deemed highly credible due to reinforcement from repair log notes and technical details about the snowmobile taillight that were difficult to fabricate. For digital evidence, the digital forensics team rewrote reports to legal standards, clearly explaining recovery of the draft-threatening letter, metadata nature, and why technical traces could not have been innocently manipulated. The report also explained why deleted files could still be reconstructed to counter defense claims of incompleteness. Special attention was given to the cell tower expert. Presentation of 1999 coverage mechanics had to be clear enough for the jury to understand that despite cruder technology then, cell tower pings retained high value in establishing device location. Charts were designed to prove Ethan's device could not have been at the gym when connecting through the Copper River East Tower, a key point in the charging theory. Internally, the prosecution created an evidence matrix linking each piece to elements of the crime. 1. Proving victim death. 2. Proving perpetrator's act. 3. Proving connection between suspect and act. DNA on the cord and fibers fell under 3. Bone distribution and binding under 2. Body identification under 1. This matrix ensured the prosecution's strategy had no missing links. Additionally, the prosecution prepared rebuttals to anticipated defense arguments such as DNA cross-contamination, cell tower misrouting, witness memory error, or 3D model inaccuracy for the time of the crime. Each was paired with a counter-proof plan. The final step in preparation was determining courtroom presentation order, starting with the 3D model to introduce terrain, followed by DNA victim identification, then cell tower timeline, evidence incriminating Ethan, and ending with financial emotional motive. The goal was to create a strong, seamless evidence narrative, leaving the jury with no plausible innocent explanation fitting all data. The complete prosecution file was sealed in 3 copies and ready for trial, marking the full transition from investigation to prosecution phase. The 2011 trial opened at the Alaska Superior Court amid intense public interest after a disappearance file spanning over a decade turned into a triple murder case. The prosecutor led the opening by presenting an overall case diagram, emphasizing that the prolonged investigation resulted not from incompetence, but from bodies hidden in ice for years, only revealed by unusual melting in 2010. After opening statements, the prosecution began presenting evidence in the prepared sequence: 3D simulation of the ice crevasse and travel route, DNA results identifying the three victims, incriminating physical evidence against Ethan, digital evidence showing the threatening letter drafted on his computer, and finally, the financial motive along with the emotional relationship with Tara Finch. The 3D model made a strong impression on the jury. The deep ice crevasse terrain, ice flow direction, jacket position, binding cord, and bone cluster were recreated in detail, showing extremely low probability of accident. Next, the prosecution called the DNA expert to explain the mini-STR and mito-DNA processes used to identify decedents in degraded conditions, particularly highlighting Ethan's DNA in the nylon cord's groove, a detail they described as an undeniable fingerprint. Defense objected, requesting removal of the description as conclusory, but the judge overruled, finding it a scientific description of the evidence. The cell tower expert then described Ethan's device appearing in the Copper River East Tower coverage area at 6018 and 6024 a.m. in 1999, aligning with the estimated time of death. The jury paid close attention as the prosecution displayed a three-layer map: Ethan's claim of being at the gym, Copper River Tower coverage area, and body recovery location. The nearly 10 kilometers geographic discrepancy prompted noticeable glances among jurors. When the digital forensics expert took the stand, the prosecution presented the recovered draft threatening letter from the Gateway 2000 hard drive, along with metadata showing keyboard device code matching equipment in the Hale home. Defense immediately countered that metadata could be forged or files corrupted, but the expert explained that this metadata type resided in firmware and could not be altered by ordinary software. One juror noted the question: if not Ethan, who else had access to the computer in the house? This was the first sign that the prosecution's argument was taking root in the jury's minds. During physical evidence presentation, the prosecution introduced the nylon binding cord in an evidence box display, explaining wear patterns, folds, and restraint mechanism per morphological analysis. When the expert testified that victim DNA was on the outer fiber layer, while Ethan's was deep in the groove, indicating separate contact times, the jury showed particular interest. One member asked, "Does that mean the cord was used to bind before being buried in ice?" And the expert confirmed the physical structure supported that conclusion. Facing strong evidence, defense focused on attacking 3 points. 1. Lack of crime scene evidence from the Hale home in 1999. 2. Potential inaccuracy in witness memory after 12 years. 3. No eyewitness seeing Ethan was victims after 5:40 a.m. They argued snow and ice could have shifted evidence. 1999 cell towers had low accuracy, and the threatening letter could have been fabricated to plant traces. However, the prosecution countered by calling witness Victor Rudd, who saw the snowmobile operator. Victor coherently described the snowmobile with misaligned red taillight on a morning near the disappearance date. Defense tried to undermine with "how do you remember that detail after 12 years?" But Victor produced 1999 notebook entries, proving memory reinforced by real data. This led the jury to rate the witness as highly credible. When the prosecution rested, they presented the evidence matrix. DNA placed Ethan at the scene. Cell tower placed him in the ice area at the critical time. Physical evidence showed restraint mechanism. Threatening letter proved premeditation. Financial motive, including insurance contracts and economic pressure, explained the reason. The jury began internal discussions, with many expressing that the alignment of evidence groups could not be coincidental. One juror said, "If only one piece, I'd still doubt," but all pointing to one person. Defense continued emphasizing no one saw Ethan harm anyone, but prosecution reminded of the legal principle: murder does not require eyewitnesses if physical and scientific evidence is strong enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Ultimately, as closing arguments concluded, the jury had ample basis to evaluate the reliability of the DNA and timeline evidence, seen as the two main pillars of the entire prosecution case. The jury retired to deliberate immediately after both sides' closing arguments, taking all exhibits, maps, DNA charts, 3D crime scene model, and cell tower documents presented throughout the extended trial. Initial discussions centered on 2 key points: reliability of DNA evidence on the binding cord and the alibi-breaking power of cell tower data. especially Ethan's device appearing near Copper River just before the three victims' time of death per forensic determination. A few jurors were initially hesitant, requesting re-review of expert excerpts on error margins, but after re-examining coverage simulation charts and technical error analysis, they agreed the data showed sufficient match to meet beyond a reasonable doubt. Additionally, recovered computer documents, the threatening letter draft with metadata clearly indicating the drafting device, were seen as evidence of directed premeditation. Jurors analyzed the defense claim of forged metadata, but concluded the hypothesis existed only in theory, with no supporting facts. Ultimately, the combination of 5 evidence groups, DNA, timeline, physical evidence, financial motive, and digital data, was evaluated as tightly interconnected, forming a logical chain. After nearly 8 hours of deliberation, the jury cast a final vote and reached unanimous agreement on guilt. Ethan Hale guilty of first-degree murder of Marissa Hale, Caleb Hale, and Jonah Hale. The courtroom fell silent as the jury returned. The judge asked the foreperson to stand and read the verdict, recording guilty on all counts. Ethan maintained a rigid expression with no clear reaction, while prosecutors requested immediate sentencing phase due to the case's severity and special nature. After considering aggravating factors including multiple victims, premeditation, efforts to conceal bodies, and prolonging accountability for years, the judge imposed consecutive life sentences without parole for all 3 counts under Alaska law. The lack of parole eligibility was emphasized to reflect the brutality and intentionality of the acts. The decision also ordered Ethan to reimburse search, recovery, and forensic costs, and required his DNA profile to be entered into the National CODA system. Following sentencing, the court recorded the case file as fully completed in all procedural steps, concluding an investigation spanning over 12 years. Ethan was escorted from the courtroom by U.S. Marshals and transferred to state custody. Prosecutors handed over all evidence and judgment to the Alaska Judicial Records Office, officially closing one of the most complex cold cases in Cordova since the late 1990s. After Ethan Hale's life without parole sentence was pronounced and the judicial file officially closed, the case's aftershocks continued to ripple through the Cordova community and Alaska's entire law enforcement system. Local police launched an internal review of 1999 missing person reporting procedures, concluding that the risk classification standards at the time, which downgraded priority absent clear violence indicators, resulted in an insufficiently thorough initial response. To address this, the Cordova Police Department issued new protocols. All missing person reports involving children or adults in harsh weather conditions are now classified as high priority, triggering immediate search within the first hour. Communities along the Copper River Delta, learning from the case's mistakes, established a neighbor check protocol, allowing neighbors to quickly report behavioral anomalies or unusual light sound from neighboring homes without waiting for family confirmation of absence. Schools, churches, and nonprofits collaborated to create a hotline for students absent from class, forming an early warning system Cordova had never had before. On the Alaska State Troopers side, the case was seen as a turning point, prompting comprehensive cold case unit reform. In a summary report to the State Department of Justice, the unit identified 3 factors that turned the case around: post-2008 DNA technology advances, digital data recovery capabilities, and re-interviewing witnesses using Cognitive Interview 2.0 standards. These were incorporated into mandatory training for all new investigators. AST developed a cold case classification system based on technological recoverability, with the Cordova case classified as a model example of technology breaking long-term deadlocks. Additionally, the investigative team expanded federal cooperation with the FBI Digital Forensics Lab to standardize collection of late 1990s computer and cell tower data areas where investigators at the time lacked tools or knowledge. The case also prompted AST to revise handling of threatening letters without clear suspects, from paper-only filing to full digitization and entry into national handwriting metadated comparison systems. One of the most significant changes stemmed from the bodies being buried in ice for over a decade. Recognizing that glacial melt could expose or destroy evidence, AST partnered with the Alaska Weather Bureau to launch Glacial Evidence Watch, a program deploying sensors to monitor ice flow and stability in areas with frequent disappearances. This allows cold case teams to rapidly survey upon detecting unusual geological changes. The Cordova case also became a key training case at the Alaska Investigative Academy, included in the Applied Cold Case Reconstruction course. Trainees must reconstruct full timelines, analyze statement discrepancies, establish evidence chains, and predict technical breakthroughs. This curriculum was credited with helping increase Alaska's cold case clearance rate from 2014-2020. In Cordova, aftershocks continued through community efforts to restore trust in law enforcement. Local government established the Marissa Caleb Jonah Memorial Fund to finance SAR equipment, drones, and K-9 training. The case spurred a safe route tracking program for school children, logging daily travel routes to detect deviations early. Socially, the truth revealed after over 12 years prompted community re-examination of approaches to domestic violence and controlling relationships. Schools strengthened family safety education, emphasizing recognition of danger signs and help-seeking. In the final comprehensive report, AST highlighted 3 core lessons. Technology can fundamentally change a seemingly unsolvable case. Investigators must maintain scientific skepticism even without bodies, and data storage, whether degraded DNA samples or old hard drives, always holds potential future value as technology advances. Upon completing post-conviction review, the 1999 Cordova case officially became required study material in all Alaska cold case investigator training programs, marking a transformation of the entire system and leaving lasting impact on how communities handle disappearances once thought unsolvable. The story of the 1999 Cordova disappearance murders, solved over 12 years later through technological advances and investigator persistence, clearly reflects many issues American society still faces today. Sometimes delayed missing person reporting processes, hard to detect domestic violence from the outside, and technological gaps in investigations that leave cases stalled for years. Ethan's creation of fake threatening letters to disguise intent, initial police downplaying reports due to no obvious violence, and bodies buried under ice for over a decade show that crime does not always reveal itself through obvious signs. This is a powerful reminder that in modern American life where technology advances, but family and social pressures also rise, every community needs early warning mechanisms and proactive observation. When the story restarted in 2010, a citizen reporting a jacket emerging from melting ice became the major breakthrough. That detail underscores that even the smallest community attention can create major impact in long-term cases. Lesson learned: if something seems off, report it. America's law enforcement system today relies heavily on public-provided information, and small signals often lead to critical clues. Another key lesson from DNA and digital forensics breaking the deadlock: understand that personal data, texts, emails, phone locations can become victim-protecting evidence. This reminds individuals to responsibly store information, be cautious in their actions, and value transparency in relationships. Finally, the story shows domestic violence does not always appear through physical injury. Sometimes it manifests through control, threats, and psychological manipulation. American communities today must continue encouraging victims and bystanders to report early, support counseling services, and intervene. The most important lesson: justice may arrive late, but it will arrive if communities stay vigilant, investigators remain persistent, and each person knows how to protect themselves and those around them. Thank you for following the entire 12-plus-year journey of solving this case. If you found the story useful and meaningful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support us. See you in the next video, where we will continue exploring other cold cases and safety lessons for every community.